Thank you, everybody. I'm calling to order the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. May I have an approval of the agenda, please?
So,
Peter made the motion, Jill seconded, roll call, Jill? Aye. Chris?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Stephen? Peter?
aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. Seeing no electric hands or hands in the room, I'm going to close it for public comment. And first up is the Housing Department and Affordable Housing Trust Fund update by Christy Ferrantella and Brian Turbot. If you'd like to come to the big table, please.
The grown-up.
The grown-up
Grown-up table. Yes. Yes, you do.
Okay.
Christy, I think you would like to.
Sorry.
No, I don't.
Oh, boy, yeah. Sorry.
Red, up, you're in the room.
Ah,
There we go.
something's going
Okay.
on.
We can't whisper to Brian, not unless we do little note passing. Okay, so Christy, thank you for being here. And I'm just going to turn, you got the questions that Stephen had sent, and then I sent them to the committee. And then Christy's pulled together a presentation, which I sent to all of you this morning, and now she'll walk us through it. So how would you prefer to do it? Do you want questions along the way? Or do you want to wait until you're done?
I can have questions along the way. I think a lot of the stuff will be covered, so I might say, pause and hold that question.
Okay.
But ask along the way.
Okay, thank you. All right, over to you.
Okay. So the first question was kind of how does the Affordable Housing Trust select the projects we're going to fund and what are our guidelines visible? So we're really driven by the select board strategic plan, and they set guides for their housing goals around maintaining safe harbor, creating home ownership opportunities, and focusing on municipal employee housing. The first goal of maintaining safe harbor really drives a lot of our decisions because in order to add units to our subsidized housing inventory, the way the state guidelines work, it's a lot easier to add rental. They add more units to our number versus home ownership. And so the model really drives more rental projects than home ownership. So if you look at what we've done over the last couple of years, we're looking at vacant land that have the opportunity to develop multiple units versus maybe one or two home ownership. And so that's kind of what has been driving a lot of the decisions. We also look at the funding source at town meetings. So PPC funds have restrictions on affordability limits, so 100% AMI or less. The neighborhood first funds, again, really focused on the shy list. And so again, focused on rentals. And we also have our housing production plan that helps us lay out the framework for how we'll meet our goals. Lastly, we do use bond counsel and our financial advisors to help us determine if we can use borrowed funds or cash for those purchases. So Brian and I have been working on, if a potential deal comes up, where are those funds going to come from so that we can know if they can be cash or potential borrowed funds, and making sure that we're not using up all of our cash reserves. We also want to make sure that we're using some CPC funds at each purchase because that helps keep units in the affordability range. So that's kind of overarching. Those are the things that guide us.
So just before we leave this slide, if the goal is safe harbor, then it's about the lowest dollar amount per unit created. That's the, if we could say there's one thing, that's what we're trying to do, produce the most housing. That's why we're looking at rentals over homeownership opportunities. And that could be the thread that we can use to connect all these things. Every project is judged based on that. Is that right?
I think one of the hardest things about real estate is it's hard to compare like apples to apples, where every deal maybe has a better incentive or a different incentive or characteristic that is appealing to it. And I'm going to go through kind of the different ways that we spend the money. So if you're looking at like construction accelerations like we've done with Richmond versus Habitat, building standalone homes. So it's, all of those are contributing to housing for the community, which is, again, affordable housing has a couple of goals to go through. So it's hard to say one single thing, but we've been more focused on adding rentals because that's adding to our subsidized housing inventory list more rapidly than if we were to do homeownership opportunities.
Right, so I guess I'm not saying that rentals are prioritized over sales. I was trying, I thought I heard you say that because the goal, I think, is to get the most unit per dollar. And sometimes that's acceleration or buy downs, sometimes it's new construction, sometimes it's whatever, but it's generally, it's get the most housing. Obviously, that's, you know, safe and meets all the other requirements, but the most housing per dollar, that's right, the most units, okay.
Can I ask a question on that? On the shy, isn't the shy really just for people who are 80% of AMI? I mean, that's the only ones. Weren't we gonna try to apply to get a waiver for that? Or to
So-
increase that or change our AMI, so it's
Yeah.
localized?
So that's a.
Later, okay.
But one of them, yeah, it's very difficult to change the state's 40B, chapter 40B law. But Governor Healy introduced the Affordable Homes Act, which has some policy around housing, and one of those is a designation for seasonal communities. And that might be a way for us to say, could seasonal communities have kind of a waiver around 40B? And that might be a way to work with it. Okay, so funding to date, town meeting has appropriated just over $84 million to date. The Affordable Housing Trust has either spent or reserved that for 67.5 million of that for current projects, leaving 17 million remaining for upcoming projects. Of that, about a third have been vacant land acquisition, another third on construction subsidies, a little bit over 20% on acceleration projects, and 7% on existing home purchases. Over the last couple of years, we've worked with some developers to do partial grants and partial loans. So about 64% of what we spent has been grants and the remainder has been loans. So that is money that will come back to the trust that can be reinvested into housing.
I watched your the trust meeting 2 days ago. It sounds like there's maybe some nuance to how you classify these loans, because some of them are, they don't amortize till you're 40 or 50. So do you know approximately how much of your loans are current loans as opposed to things that we don't ascribe any value to because we're not getting the money back for so long?
So I think it's really more, and we're still talking about this with our auditors too, because this is, I mean, I think it's more nuanced with bond counsel and our ability to use borrowed funds and how they're looking at it, whether it's a grant or in their mind as they go through their process, whether the likelihood of payback is real or not. And in their mind, when you have what they would consider to be deeply subordinated loans with 50-year amortization schedules, and then some not amortizing till after the first 50-year mortgage is extinguished, they look at them more as grants. Okay. But as we've discussed with them in some of those scenarios, we do hold first position on the underlying assets. So there's still, the town is protected from that perspective. If it should not perform the way and they can't meet the obligation, we would have the ability to gain the asset, which ultimately would, in one way or another, would provide the return of the payment, right?
50, you mean like 50 years from the issuance?
Well, depending on the terms of them all, but most of them, the longest one is, well, the longest three are 50 years with 2 7-year mortgages amortizing after the 50-year mortgage is paid off. I think that that's the bulk of, I think, of the 36% is the 50-year loans. The ones to Richmond are, I think, closer to 35 years, but they start, there's an interest period that is actually coming up pretty soon where we're going to get interest only. And then we start getting principal payback, I think, after either 5 or 10 years from that period. I guess this would be a good time to kind of talk about it. We have internally been talking about this, given bond counsel's concern about how the length of time on some of these mortgages and the lower than town borrowing interest rate. Which has led to, if you watched the meeting, you know that Hilltop was on that. Which has led to us kind of looking at restructuring how we're participating in those deals. To reduce the length of time that the town's money is outstanding and reduce the length of time before it starts coming back to us to try to alleviate some of those concerns.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next.
Brian?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious of our strategic use of leverage. I'm trying to understand, is the 84 million, which is partially grants and partially pure equity, has that been leveraged at the property level? Or are we following an unleveraged purchase strategy?
That's a good question. Let me think about that and I'll answer you before the end of the meeting. How's that?
Okay, sure.
Anything else, Jeremy?
No, that was it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, go ahead, Christie.
Okay, so this next chart just shows how we've added used units to our subsidized housing inventory and how town meeting has increased funding over the last several years. So really that kickoff in 2019 with Rick Atherton's article and the Neighborhood First funds that helped kind of jumpstart a lot of the purchases and funding for these projects. We are one of the only towns in Massachusetts that has consecutively stayed in safe harbor since 2019. So I just think that that's a huge accomplishment that we want to focus on the good that's come from what we've been able to achieve. Next slide. So this slide goes over all the projects that have used part of that 67.5 million funds. I broke it down by construction subsidies. So that's where we're helping the developer like Habitat for Humanity or Housing Nantucket construct the units. The next section looks at development accelerations. So that was those are projects that we worked with Richmond on to accelerate the timeline to produce the housing faster. We have a few existing home purchases and the remainder are vacant land acquisition. And the final thing is our closing cost assistance, which has been a successful program and has ramped up to help over almost 100 families to date. Just going through the columns, this information is showing you the number of units, the total that has been spent by the town, if it's rental or ownership. The price per unit is the construction price per unit on the construction subsidy. And then the other part, it's looking at the subsidy per unit. So the Richmond acceleration, they don't have a cost of 108,000 per unit. That's our subsidy per unit. And last column is the construction price per square foot. One thing I just wanted to note on 31 Fairgrounds is that 606 excluded the basement. So when you're actually looking at the total price per square foot, it's $404 when you include the basement, which is what 6 Fairgrounds includes.
Christie, where does the price per unit come from?
That's what the developer has in their price per unit to construct. So
So,
they're taking the full cost, fully loaded cost to develop and then dividing it by the number of units.
so if you look at 6 Fairgrounds, maybe I'm reading this wrong, if it costs $900,000 per unit, why is the grand total only 7.5?
So that the grand total of the town's contribution.
Just the town's.
So that
Okay.
project is 57
Okay,
million.
okay,
That project is close to 50.
yeah, okay.
Makes sense. It's gotta be closer to 60, right?
It's
Yes.
probably 57
57 million is what their current
at this point.
project costs. So
They could change tomorrow.
so yes, well,
Speak.
31 fairgrounds and 6 fairgrounds may have additional cost to completion, but the developers are working to finance those gaps, whether it's through state or other proceeds.
I'm sorry, which projects need more money?
31 fairgrounds and 6 fairgrounds are just, they're not completed. So this is the pricing that we have at the current price.
And does this include the sorry, for 6 Fairgrounds Road, does this include the additional money that we know that they're going to ask for, but maybe haven't formally requested yet?
So the 7.5 million is only what they've requested, which is 6.5 million as a construction subsidy and $1 million for the basement.
And the rumored amount is like 5 to 6 million that they need more?
Less than that, they have about a $2.3 million gap at the moment. And they're working to see if the state could increase their contribution. So that's what I'm saying, there might be an additional ask, but we're not, that hasn't been a formal ask of them. But we did, until we get to the end of the financing round, I didn't want to put any additional information that was on them.
So with the, I mean, that's a pretty dense project, 2 buildings, I think. Or four buildings, so 16 units in each building. Why does it cost so much more for that project to be constructed than Habitat for Humanity and Wade Drive? And why is Wade Drive Habitat for Humanity not a better model if it's cheaper?
So Habitat is the home ownership. And right now Habitat has been able to get all of their units on the Shire list. But previously that wasn't something, and the subsidy is substantial. So if you're able to build for about 800,000 a unit for Habitat, they can only sell for 270,000. So the town would subsidize greatly. Versus a rental subsidy is a lot lower, at roughly about 400,000.
Okay. So the town's outlay for per unit outlay is lower for Wade Drive.
Currently with only 7.5 million going to 64 units. It's only about 100,000 per unit, 117,000
Okay, but
as a subsidy.
but the total developer cost is lower with the Habitat model than with the larger institutional type housing for 6 fairgrounds.
And I think one of the other reasons too is because, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's donated labor and stuff in the Habitat model that would not be in the 6 fairgrounds model.
Right, which is, I think, an asset. For
No, I would agree, but
I
yeah.
mean, it seems more economical as a way to do this.
Right. It's also 6 units for 64. We're adding.
Right,
A lot.
there should be economies of scale when you do more than 3. We should be getting better.
Okay,
That's it.
All right, so then kind of the next bundle of slides, we go to the next one, gonna be looking at the construction subsidies, and what I've done is there's 2 slides for each project. The first slide is kind of a cheat sheet on, total appropriated number of units for the project, rental or home ownership, what the funding source is for this project, and the status and completion date. The second slide is going to show you the timeline of the project. So this 6 fairgrounds is a combination of 30, 60, and 120% AMI. And as I mentioned previously, the 7.5 million is constructed of a $6.5 million construction subsidy. That would be a loan, and then $1 million grant for the construction of 1 additional basement. This funding source is dependent on bond council. So what Brian and I do, as I mentioned, is we kind of put a line item that we want to use this specific funding source, and then once it goes to bond council, we'll decide if it can be cash or borrowed funds, and that might change. And up until it's done. General timeline, this has been a long project in the making. Original completion date was 2019, that got pushed out with the neighbor appeal. Special permit was issued in 2021, and then that's when they realized there was a funding gap in 2022. We had to go back to the state in 2023, and we are now, they're still in the due diligence phase. This is our plan A to stay in safe harbor. So we're working diligently with them to try to get everything lined up with that additional 2.3 million gap, and work to see if we can get them to close on their financing and issue building permits by December 1st.
so they have to have the building permits issued in order for us to stay in safe harbor.
Correct.
Okay. And what's plan B, Christy?
Plan D is 135, 137 Orange, and plan C is working to see what else we could.
It's buying a boat.
Yes.
What's the projected subsidy, or however we're characterizing the additional cost to the town for 135, 137 Orange?
Can we repeat that?
Yeah.
We'll come to those pages. She has them for all.
Okay.
Okay, so if we move on to the next project, this is 31 Fairgrounds. This was a collaboration where Housing Nantucket owns the land, but the trust facilitated with a grant and loans for purchasing that land and developing 22 units. This is going to be rental. That's going to serve 50, 80, 110, and 150% AMI. And the projected completion date is June 1st of 2024. If you look at the timeline, this project really started at the end of 2020 with the initial planning board project. Along the way, there's been a few adjustments when it went through HDC appeal that expanded the size of the buildings and the price of each of the units. Things started to arrive in 2022, and then the modulars started to arrive, and then the steamship imposed a moratorium on modulars arriving over the summer. So that kind of delayed the project a couple of months. We've had a couple of cost adjustments with the skyrocketing cost of construction. But we've been meeting, there's a mini subgroup, a construction committee of one Affordable Housing Trust member, Steve Hollister, who's the project manager for Housing Nantucket. And the builder, we meet every single week, and we're going to continue to do that until COs are issued. So we're closely monitoring this project and getting to a completion of June 1st.
So what's the legal structure here? Who owns the project?
Housing Nantucket.
So Housing Nantucket, and what's the town's involvement? Just subsidies because we like what the project is?
Correct.
So what if the town in the past, I mean, this is all, I think, complete at this point with the cost overruns, or you guys had a meeting this morning. Are there more cost overruns or where?
For this project, we're still trying to figure out the full cost of completion and how that will be funded.
And is it the town's sole responsibility to see that any cost overruns are taken care of, or? And who's been funding them as they've come up?
They, prior cost increases or changes have been brought to the Affordable Housing Trust, and that's for additional grants or mortgages. But I think that there's been conversations about what to do with this one. That I'm not sure where they're at this time, but the previous ones have been funded with approval of the Affordable Housing Trust, either via additional grants or indoor mortgages, depending.
And this one.
And approval of the select board, if there's anything over $100,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust for an expenditure does require select board approval.
Gotcha. So this, on the earlier slide, the $580,000 per unit, is that what's been spent so far, or?
That's what we've approved to come from the town
To date.
to date. We haven't expensed all of it. I think there's 480,000 that we haven't issued to Housing Nantucket yet.
And when you say from the town, are there other sources of funding for this project?
Sorry, the trust.
Just the trust.
Gotcha. Okay.
Next project. So the next couple of slides, focusing on Habitat for Humanity. Their current upcoming project, as many of you might be aware, the select board and the trust just approved a $4 million grant to help with the construction of this project. This is going to be 6 units of home ownership. That's going to be completed by the end of 2025 into quarter 1 of 2026.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can we go back for a second to 31 Fairgrounds? The total appropriation, is it 16?
It's $16,379,000. That includes the cost of the land, the grant for the land purchase.
Gotcha.
And then the 12 million, I think it's 779 is the construction cost.
I see. I got it. Thank you.
If you can go to their timeline. Pretty straightforward timeline. They went to the RFP issue to get the land from the town at $1 per lot.
Yes.
And is now on their way to construct these 6 homes. Going to be 4 standalone homes and 1 duplex. Next slide. Again, this was just really background material to illustrate where the funds have been spent and what's been created. So this is 5 more units of home ownership that Habitat for Humanity have been able to complete with the funding that was provided from town meetings. Next slide. The next couple slides, I'm looking at the acceleration of construction with Richmond. This first is an upcoming project with Sandpiper Place 2. This is the construction of 7 homeowner units. There's 6 at 80% AMI and 1 at 175% AMI. This is a 100% loan. It's a short-term loan for 18 months to expedite. This would have taken about 2 to 3 years for them to first build. And the way that we structured the deal is everything will be completed and sold by December 31st of 2024.
Is there any risk that it won't?
I don't think so. They pulled building permits for 6 out of the 7. And these are contributing to help with Safe Harbor.
Okay,
And Madam Chair, that particular project, that grant agreement that we completed with them did require construction by December 31st, and the expectation is that they will be fully sold by December 31st. That was part of the condition for the $3.1 million grant.
okay, thank you.
This again is just a review of the 2 prior projects we did with Richmond, which was focused on rental units. On these 2 projects, we all the units projects that Richmond have done have 80% AMI for their rental. That 25% are required to be 80% or lower. We went in and provide a subsidy to create lower affordability. So we did a 50%, 80%, brought some markets down to 110 or 120. So we brought in more variability of affordability, and now more units in these developments are at affordable levels versus market rate. So these are both constructed as both loans and grants to Richmond. And as of last week, they have all the COs for all the units, not this week. So I just actually was driving by there today and everything's looking great. Go to the next, that's just the timeline of when money was awarded and when projects were completed. And moving into vacant land. So this is our upcoming projects. So 135, 137 Orange. This is a potential of 31 units. That's our magic number with Safe Harbor. We need to create 0.5% of our housing stock per year, or 31 units per year. The idea behind it is that it would be a rental, and the RFP has been issued. We received 1 response, and that's currently being reviewed by the committee. And you can go to the next slide. Just illustrates the timeline. It was purchased in 2020. 141, which is right next door, was purchased by the land bank in 2022, and that creates an easement for the town. The RFP was approved in January of 2023 and then issued through April and October. I think this is kind of a good timeline of how things have been moving through. When people will say, like, you bought land, how quickly can you develop it? It takes a little bit of time to issue the RFP, to review the bids, and then actually award it and get them started.
So, back to that for a second. Realistically, when we buy land, we're looking at 6 or 7 years before we have beds and heads and beds.
For the vacant land, that's what, I mean, I think, don't want to blame COVID, but that did delay things. Brian and I have been talking about how we can be more efficient in the RFP process. One of the ideas is to bundle the ones that we have outstanding at the moment, and that might entice more developers to come in if you have a larger scale of units to create. And so our goal is that 2025, all of these that we have on vacant land would be constructed in 2025, 2026, 2027. Would be the goal.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
May I comment?
of course, Brooke, go ahead.
So there's a couple of other factors in here that affect this timeline, right? So we're constantly trying to line up Safe Harbor. So sometimes we don't develop something as quickly as we could theoretically, because we don't want to stack too many units in a calendar year, because then you've wasted them in a sense in the Safe Harbor timeline. So that's part of the reason why 135 and 137 didn't get developed, because we were doing other things that got us Safe Harbor. So we constantly try to stack them up in order to stay in Safe Harbor. And you also have to remember, we didn't have all this funding all at once.
Right.
So we've been seeking funding all along. So not every project had the cash available to subsidize the development of it as well. So those 2 factors also play into what feels like a little bit more of a protracted timeline, but it's really quite intentional
Okay.
in a lot of ways.
I mean, has there been consideration for buying houses that have, or lots that have capacity to put other homes on the property? And, take a look at that versus having to start from scratch and
Right, so that one of the units that we purchased on Somerset has the ability to add more dwellings to it, so there's currently a home, so 3 people are housed in it, and there's the potential to add more.
Okay, thank you.
So, I don't know what the stat, I know you have your bid back and there has been no award made. Can you share what the expected cost is for the 31 units?
The total cost of 19 million, it was about 980 square foot is what they're coming in at their price point, 920 per square foot.
19 million, that does not include the land
Does
here?
not include them, because the town has already purchased the land. And a necessary easement that we needed to be able to join the two.
And what is the requirement under the bid if you were to award to this one applicant? On what timeline do you have to make that award? And is it realistic that you get, you know, the permits you hold or the certificates of occupancy, or whatever the goal is to get on the shy list? Is it realistic that would happen in 2025?
I guess I would say that there's going to be a meeting in probably another 2 weeks to discuss that, make that determination, but I'm not sure that it's realistic. To be honest with you, it's the best way that I can answer the question right now without bypassing the committee, the review committee, to be honest with you. But I don't know that that's a realistic goal right now for that, with that project. Okay. Does that help a little bit?
It's, I think, the right answer, so yeah.
I'll move on to 12 and 12R Bartlett. The potential here is for 12 rental units. And this is one of the RFPs that Brian had want to bundle and have issued. And combined with an additional property at Vesco Lane could help kind of contribute a year of safe harbor if we put a couple of them together. Thank you. The next
Hang on a second, see, Jeremy, you had a question?
I did. If I understand this correctly, we need to make 31 units a year to stay within safe harbor. And there is a bit of a balancing act required that Brooke mentioned on funding sources as well as what you want to get completed. But I was curious if 31 properties need to be developed, or 31 homes, is that at 600,000 per unit? Or, you know, how much is that per? Or 800,000 per? And I was curious, the town is giving us about $5 million a year to do this. And I was just curious, I guess, the scope of capital requirements versus what the town is providing.
Brian, I think that question was pointed towards
Sorry,
you.
oh, sorry.
No, that's okay, Jeremy, I'm just helping Brian
Well,
think.
so
Thank you, Madam. Sweet.
So through you, Madam Chair, first of all, I think you're referring to the $6.5 million override, which is transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust, which there's an article after this presentation to discuss a potential for borrowing opportunity to kind of address what you're talking about, Jeremy.
Okay.
I think that this was actually kind of discussed a little bit at the Affordable Housing Trust meeting on Tuesday, because we did have bond counsel there. I don't think, in all honesty, that the town's commitment for any of these projects will ever be 100% of the cost per unit based on the, and Vicky's on the call, so she can also correct me if I misspeak, but I don't think that the town's contributions will ever reach the full 100% in the value that you're talking about for any of these unit projects or unit construction, Jeremy, because we have some limitations on using borrowed funds for public projects because we have to deal with the anti-aid amendment under the Constitution and affordable restrictions. So it's highly unlikely that the town would ever be fully funding 31 units a year at the full value. It may be
Well, the
30.
math doesn't work.
Well, the math would mean that the developers are going to have to be able to find the funding to supplement what the town could lawfully be able to potentially contribute to these deals if they down in the town's analysis, it makes sense to participate.
And that's why projects like Six Fairgrounds, go to the state for
Right.
tax credits that can help offset. So the project is close to 60 million at Six Fairgrounds, and almost half of that is being funded by the state. Those are extremely competitive and only happen every couple of years where we might be eligible. So if we want to get this built more quickly, the town comes in to help subsidize, and that's where something like a transfer fee could provide that additional revenue that could be further.
Looking at the big picture, as I understand this, let's say the town, we need to help develop 31 units a year. And let's say they cost $800,000 a unit. I think the math comes out at 25 million bucks of gross costs before probably some extra stuff the developers have in there. And the town can provide in a number of different flavors, about $6.5 million of, let's call it first loss money, equity of some sort. And then there are a whole bunch of other things the state may have before we get to what the developer puts in, before the developer may go to the private sector for mortgage money.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a whole bunch of different flavors of capital in grants and debt and equity and other things that go into this. That makes it highly complex, of course.
Mhm.
I was just trying to understand the scope of what we're looking at here. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I've just,
Okay,
I believe it. I understand now.
thank you, Jeremy. Vicky?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add that, so there are a few considerations that also need to be taken into account. Some of these projects, the town is putting in the cost of the land. So, which is, an important asset also for these developers to come to the table with from us. So, not only are we providing.
Hey, Dwyer, it's Stephen Cohen. How are you?
Stephen, could you mute,
I'm
please?
good. You got a couple
Steven?
minutes?
Stephen?
All right.
You muted him, thanks.
We might
Okay.
have wanted to hear that.
No, we did not. Go ahead, Vicky.
I was afraid he was going to interrupt me. The town has, valuable asset, which is the land. For instance, in Six Fairgrounds, the town is putting up the land and then it's going to ground lease this project to the developer. That is very often a way that many towns fund these projects. In addition, you were correct, Jeremy, that these developers very often not only they seek, depending upon the type of project that they're developing, and there have to be strict requirements for meeting state tax credit requirements. So if they're looking for funding from a state tax credit, they have to develop X number of units at certain levels of AMI. So it's very specific requirements. Not all of our projects will meet those requirements. In the case of Six Fairgrounds, they have, and they have been awarded state tax credits. So not all the projects will qualify for that. And then the last thing is many of these developers, in fact, most of them will be going for private funding as well to construction loans to develop these projects. So they do have access to other sources. And I think as time goes on, I think that the town is going to be, making contributions of some sort, but also seeking ways for the developers to be able to contribute to these projects as well. And, we've gotten a lot of advice from bond counsel. I mean, through the last few meetings that I've had, they are trying to advise us as to how to best structure any loans that the trust is willing to grant, as well as in conjunction with grants. So I hope that gives you a perspective.
Thank you, Vicky.
That's very helpful.
Okay, Christy, back to you.
So we covered 12 and 12R Bartlett, up the potential for 12 units. That RFP is ready and again, going to be bundled to be issued. You go to the next slide. The town and the trust purchased 7 Amelia jointly. This is what also provided the driveway through to Waite Drive. So now Waite Drive connects to Tacoma. This was partially funded with CPC funds. So the idea behind it is that might be commercial on the first floor with units on the second floor. And 25% of the units would have to be 100% AMI or less.
Presumably 25% would have to be 80%, right? If we're trying to get them on the shy list.
Yes, what did I say?
25% at 100 or less.
Sorry.
No, I just want to make sure that these are meeting the goal, I assume.
Right,
Yeah.
so there'll be additional units. The CPC is what puts it at 100%.
Got it, but you'll do one of them at 80%.
Okay, the next slide is 16 Vesper. So this has been a long project in the making. This is a land that was purchased from UMass. Originally, the town purchased 18 Vesper, and then we did a swap with the Cottage Hospital for 16. So now that swap went through in December, the trust will be working on issuing an RFP, and the potential for this is for 19 units.
And there is someone living in the house that's there now.
We have the vacant lot.
Oh, can you go back?
Yeah, it's not shown exactly correctly on the map. So the hospital retained ownership of the quadplex to the left,
Okay,
and the Affordable Housing Trust ended up with the gray shaded
Okay.
area.
thank you, because I thought there was a house there. I was like, okay, it looks like a house. So,
It's off-land.
okay, thank you.
8 White Street, this came to the trust through the bargain sale program. And given the zoning in this area, we think it's a great opportunity for a home ownership opportunity for maybe roughly 3 to 6 units. This RFP still needs to be issued, but we want to work with the neighbors on this. And so I've been working with the neighbors to try to set up something for the spring to try to talk about what they might be comfortable in that area, and then hopefully develop an RFP by the end of this year. So we've covered a lot around safe harbor and subsidized housing inventory, but it did update with the 2020 census. So our number jumped from about 400 units a year to 400 units for our 10%, jumping to 618 units. So that was a 26% increase. So we're always kind of looking at the 5-year plan of how to reach that 10% goal. We were almost there, and then the census updated, and now we have a higher number to reach. And we currently have 332 units. So we're at just about halfway through to our 10% goal.
Does it ever go down?
In 2020 and 2030, there's a potential that it could. It depends on the number of units that are qualified as year-round.
Okay,
And so the idea is 10% of your housing stock, and you have to contribute 1% or 0.5% a year to stay in safe harbor.
Madam Chair,
yes,
oddly, the way 40B works is you're building year-round units
right,
that add to the number of
Year-round
year-round
units,
units that
yeah.
contribute to the shy list number. So
so.
solving the problem, solving 40B chases 40B, it's,
Circular reference.
yeah, it's.
Doesn't work for you.
Chris,
Just in the year of credit is the year the building permit is issued. That's
It depends on the project. So if there was a 40B, that's when the comprehensive permit is issued. If it's a different development, it's when the building permit. So with Richmond, it was when building permits are pulled, that's when they contribute to safe harbor. In the case for housing Nantucket with 31 Fairgrounds, they submitted an application to add those units, and so that they call an LAU, local action unit. When that was awarded, those units counted.
thanks.
The Surfside Crossing went on the shy list and then came off the shy list.
So the $1 million question is, can they potentially get back on if there is?
What is a waiting list for housing for them?
So we don't at the town maintain our own housing list, but from Richmond and Housing Nantucket, it's I think hundreds of people on the wait list.
Rob,
So related to that, do town employees get prioritized for the projects that we fund, or how's it?
So we currently haven't been haven't been able to do that. We are working on two things. One, we're asking the EOHLC, which was formerly the DHCD, Housing and Community Development, for a special local municipal preference. And that would allow municipal employees to be placed in units. So everything has to go through a lottery. So we would ask that the lottery first only do municipal employees, and if they get filled, then those units would go to them. If not, the general public could participate in the lottery.
So currently prevented by law.
Currently prevented because of anti-aid. We can't use public funds to create housing for employees.
Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, looking at Frankfurt. But that is one of our goals, and the hope with Governor Healy's bill is this seasonal community designation might allow for municipal local governments.
Sorry, can you just clarify that point?
Go ahead.
Thank you. On can't use exactly how you phrase it. We can't use public money for employee housing.
For assisting individuals.
I think because
The fact that they're municipal employees are still an individual, which is one of the issues, one of our,
So I didn't hear that issue come up with the $1 million grant that we were going to do. I heard a bunch of other issues, union things, but was that the deal,
$1
Shelley?
million grant are we talking about?
that never. got
Yeah,
used.
2 years ago, the $1 million that was going to be used in
No,
select.
Yeah, that never came up, but there was a way, I think, because that wasn't borrowed money, I think, and it was, I don't remember all of the details because we kind of forgot about that program since it never worked.
Right.
But I don't know that, Vicky can probably answer this better, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure if it's the anti-aid amendment that is the issue or the Fair Housing Act, which prevents municipal employees currently from getting preferential treatment. Is that right, Vicky?
So the guidelines for EOHLC, first of all, only provide that a municipality can use the local preference for up to 70% of the units. So the units that would be covered, those parties would go into a lottery and be chosen through the lottery if they qualify. And like I said, they can only have 70% of the units go to local preference. So we have been working with EOHLC to have a special municipal employee preference, because municipal employees could be considered as part of the local preference, but they're not separated. So now we're working with the EOHLC to try to get them to agree to allow us to have from the units that are local preference units, we could use those units towards municipal employees. So, if you had X number of units that were going to be, I'm not very good at math off the top of my head, but if you had, say, 10 units in a project, 7 of the units can be local preference units. And then from those 7, we would be seeking perhaps, say, 2 of those 7 to be geared for and earmarked for municipal employees. But the local preference is really up to EOHLC. The towns need to demonstrate that they need to have a local preference. Nantucket has been able to have them, awarded 4 projects already. So they obviously, see the need for us to be able to have a local preference here for the units. But it's really because of the guidelines that drives the local preference, as well as compliance with the fair housing laws. And so you cannot give an individual a benefit above and beyond the average person who's applying for a unit in the local preference if you give them to just municipal employees. So you have to find a way to comply. And, one of the things is you're going to need approval by EOHLC to be able to do that.
So I know we're talking a lot about income restricted units and things, but in the fair housing pieces, does that relate to all housing? So for instance, the stuff we're building at the airport and
no, so this is just
Right.
related to EOHLC.
which is just income restricted units. If we're not trying to get them shy listed or anything, then we have carte blanche to rent to employees. Okay.
Then the
Thank you.
airport's able to do what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I just I had three questions, but just to follow up on what we just talked about. I was curious, is there a short version of how we are able to prioritize certain groups over others, municipal workers, healthcare, or the fire and safety guys? Or is it only when we purchase one of these or get funded outside of a number of these government safe harbor programs?
Vicky,
Because
I'll have to
I've heard
get
some
that.
very complex responses that I'm afraid of.
So if I may ask, so are you asking that, is there a way that the town is able to take, so the local preference, just so you understand, the local preference could be municipal residents, residents of the town, it could be people who have school-age children in the town, it could be people who live and work in the town. So you're looking to then go to specific types of workers who work in the town? Is that what you're seeking a special?
I'm seeking
for?
clarification because I get this question all the time. And I know this is highly complex, but I was wondering, outside of the complexity, is there any possible way to prioritize certain groups? And I think I heard you say that there were 70% had to go to the public at large. So can we take 30% of a program and prioritize one group over another?
Well, if you were going to try to take like firemen versus teachers or policemen, I would think that perhaps some of those unions would have an issue with how that's being dealt with. I'm not a labor lawyer, but I would think that by prioritizing one group of employees against another, I think that could be very problematic for the town. I do know that, they do try to place certain employees in housing, but that's for a specific job versus, specific position, rather than just for trying to designate certain groups against one another. And I believe the town manager is here online. Perhaps she can answer that question or address your comment.
Jeremy, what's your next question?
Oh, I was trying to figure out the global demand on our island for these homes. If we are producing 31 units a year to maintain or to stay within safe harbor, how many people are seeking those 31 homes annually?
At least 32. I think we can move on.
There's a lot. I know that Tucker's currently working on compiling data for the BOHLC that is looking at how many people applied, but the majority of applicants are people living and working, and they're applying for the local preference option. But I don't have that information in front of me, but I'm happy
So
to.
for every one property that comes up, are there 2x, 3x, 6x?
Oh, it's like 8 times.
Yeah.
Um,
8 to 10.
That's what I was trying to understand. Okay, so I know it's a lot. And the final question I had was for the shy requirement. What is the difference between renting for a property that gets put together for rental versus a property that gets put together for somebody in the right bucket to purchase?
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
I have it on my list to clarify. So the way chapter 40B is set up, and I'm not entirely sure of the intent of the law, but a rental development like Richmond, 200 in its original iteration before we did buy downs. 225 units proposed, 25% of them deed restricted at 80% AMI, the remainder market rate, 100% of them count on the shy list. It's a quirk of chapter 40B that if it's a rental development, they all count regardless of income, so long as 25%. Surfside Crossing, home ownership development, 25% deed restricted at 80% as a requirement. The remaining 80% of the unit, 75% of the units, do not count on the shy list. Sachem's Path, 40 units, priced at 80%, 100 and 150% AMI, only the 80% units because it's a home ownership. It's just a quirk of 40B, and it's why we focus on rentals, because we can stagger the AMI limits on them. Tacoma Green has 5 levels of income. So we can meet some of the other desperate needs in the market at or above 80% and still have them count on the shy list. That's why we do rentals.
Got it. So Brooke, this thing is a giant linear program nightmare with the complexity as you guys navigate it.
Yep.
Got it.
Libby?
Thank you. I was just gonna mention back to the employee preference issues discussion that John and I have talked about this a few times and he's developing a legal opinion, but first off, we have language in all of our union contracts now that indicates they do not argue when we offer union members housing. So that's hopefully covered. Secondly, as far as categorizing the various groups of employees into preference, I think that is an unanswered question right now. And so far that hasn't really come up because we obviously don't have loads of housing to even do that with. And right now it's because we don't really have that, we are essentially prioritizing non-union department head level positions for the available units that we have secured.
Thank you, Libby. Okay, Christy?
All right, so that covers safe harbor. We move to the next slide. This just shows a graph of kind of what has been created to date and who has contributed. So that big chunk is from Richmond. We still have 286 units left to get to our 10%. And as was noted at the select board meeting and always talked about in the community, this is the state's 10%. We have a significant higher need in the community that goes above 618 units. The next slide, this is kind of the 4-year plan of how to stay in safe harbor. So as Brooke mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're trying to stagger things to make sure that we're staying in safe harbor. So even if we could develop Vesper and Bartlett, say in 1 year, we might want to push it off one additional year to make sure those line up to stay in safe harbor. On this, we still need an additional 26 units that's not on our current plans. So at some point the trust is always seeking ways to either again purchase another vacant lot or another buy down that would happen in 2027 to add units. And either at that point, we would only need 26 units and we'd reach our 10%. We don't need a full 31 units for that year.
Thank
If
you.
everything goes to plan. The next slide is what Brian will be covering after this around borrowing authority, but this is all the projects that we have on our radar and the funding gap that's needed to complete these projects. And working with bond counsel, these are kind of the target levels of what the maximum subsidy per property could be. This was really taking an average subsidy. A 30% buy down is a lot more funding. So the way bond counsel targets it is you take the market rent to the affordable rent and then look at that difference over 25 years and that value. So buy down to 30% AMI is going to be a significant subsidy versus the buy down to 100% AMI. So really averaging all different ranges of AMI levels, this was the kind of target subsidy we have per project, which would lead a request of about $46 million.
So that's Article 20. Is that correct,
It
Brian?
will be right. And I would just point out that one of the things that, because we've done a few projects, we've done fairgrounds, we've done a few with Richmond, and we have the one potentially at 6 fairgrounds. The future projects here and some that I think are just being discussed that haven't really been formalized. They've certainly become significantly more complex in the structure and the needs. Bond counsel and also our regular legal counsel with Vicky have been tremendous helps in getting really kind of laying out the parameters and the roadmap for using borrowed funds to be able to create the housing. And we've also started working with, as most people know, when we do a borrowing, Hilltop Securities, which is Cinder McNerney, who's the managing director of the Boston office, has been helping as our financial advisor, helping us go to market, smooth out amortization tables, doing all of the work behind the scenes for us to get the bonds ready to sell. They also have a group that is a house, they have two housing groups, one that deals in non-affordable housing, and then they have one that deals primarily in affordable housing, working on both with developers and or communities in doing this. And they actually, we have brought them in now to start to really kind of analyze these deals a little bit on a deeper level, to get a better understanding of more of what the town's risks are, because the deals that are being presented are much more complex than just straight lending a developer money to go and do it. And I think that one of the things that the trust saw, and this really kind of also speaks to Article 20 in the request of the borrowing authority, is that as they get more complex, we need to make sure that we're getting terms that properly value the town's money that we're putting out, and provides the security that we need to ensure for the taxpayers who have been very gracious in doing all this. So as we've done some of these are some of the things that we've internally discussed and promoted, that there are better ways to be going about doing these deals. So it's just one thing I did want to add here, because that's $45 million more on top of the 85. So.
Right, and so when you say security, you mean like the town's gonna get what it was told it was going to?
Yeah, and
in a
also
reasonable time frame?
structuring and, reviewing the financials from the developer and understanding, if there's, whether there's a recapitalization, and can the town expect to participate in that somehow and get part of any money that is not grant related back, and how do we do that and structure it so that it's more conventional rather than 50-year mortgages with two or three mortgages after that amortizing, not starting amortizing till their 50-year mortgage has been paid off, and we're basically have 60-year mortgages of some of this stuff, which in reality, which goes to your question, Jeremy. So all of the money that we've put out has been leveraged, is all borrowed funds from us. So I would consider it leveraged. And most of the money in the initial rounds, with a lot of the way that they were structured, the debt will have been paid off 30 years before we see the payback from any of the loans that we've put out. So what we've done, and with Christie, and even before Christie with Tucker, has been, okay, we need to start analyzing these differently, because we're putting up the money now and we're waiting years and years and years to get it, long after we've borrowed, long after we've paid the debt service.
And there's no mechanism for us right now in any of the deals that we have.
Not on the ones we've already entered into. So,
So Brian, that
Jeremy,
84
hang on
million,
a second. Jeremy, hang on. Brian was still talking.
sorry.
So I know you're quite not all of the 84 million is borrowing authority, Jeremy. There's about 10 million of it that is would be raise and appropriate and unleveraged capacity that we have.
Okay, Jeremy, go ahead now.
So my question is a little different, and that is, we've deployed 84 million to date into projects that probably themselves deployed $300 to $400 million of capital to develop, if I had to just warrant a guess. And our money was in some form, most likely a grant. And now we're looking at a number of the projects that have been identified. People have said we need an additive $46 million. And so it would be interesting to see where in the new stuff, which I guess this firm in Boston will help you do, where our sliver of equity grant first loss money will fit in to that $46 million. And it would also be very interesting to know from these developers, how much they stand to make after the banks get paid off and they have all their other grants, because it seems like there's some opportunity here, as you've said, Brian, to enhance the taxpayer's return.
Right, and that's one of the reasons that we had began these conversations after the first round of doing this, and as well as trying to shorten back some of the payback periods, because in all of the RFPs we put out on a go forward basis, it will require all of the pro forma financials to be able to analyze this and determine the best course of action for us to participate, if it makes sense for us to participate. The number there at the 46 million, Jeremy, just to let you know, is essentially at this point our best guess calculation on what as we understand from bond counsel, how they would look at them. It's our best guess calculation of the maximum level we could participate at. So it may be, we may end up depending on what ultimately happens in the financials that are presented to us, we may end up participating in some of these at less levels than, at a lower level than what's that right there is our best guess. That is not anything from any of the developers or any participants, because the vast majority of those have not gone out to an RFP for development.
So on the 135, 137 Orange Street, we heard earlier the numbers around 19 million for construction. What is this number?
Which is what?
What is this 6.5 million?
That's the maximum estimate that we believe we would be able to participate if we could come to an agreement to participate.
So somebody will spend 19 million and the town will subsidize up to 6.5 million. That's what you just said.
Yes.
Plus the value of the land. 'cause
Plus
it's
the value of the
future, right?
land, yes.
Peter?
What kind of, how many RFPs come back on these projects? I heard Christie said we only got one on a
Well,
project.
so, let's go backwards. So 6FG, which was probably one of the very first ones we put out. There were 4 firms that participated. There was, I think, 9 people on the review committee. Ultimately, Hal Keen was selected from that, okay, from those 4 submit responses back here, excuse me. We put out the 135, 137, and there was only 1 response, which is currently in evaluation. I think there's going to be a meeting scheduled for March 6th for myself to discuss options and paths for that particular RFP. What Christie had mentioned too already, I think, Peter, was that with some of the other ones that we have being 12 and 12R Bartlett, 8 White Street, maybe 16 Vesper, 7 Amelia, is looking at bundling those together and putting them out as one larger scale project that may leverage larger developers' interest because of the larger number of units. Because there are some developers that have actually kind of in passing said, you know, what you put out wasn't really big enough for us to be too interested, given the cost of mobilization to get over here and do the work. So what we're looking at is considering putting, you know, the majority of those projects out as one to try to get a much higher unit count that may leverage their capacity to build or to even consider participating in it.
But obviously, we're minimized on how much we can impact the deal.
We potentially are minimized on how much we could impact the deal, yes.
We need it, but we don't, you know, I don't know. It's kind of a tough thing.
It's, believe me, we had, as Vicky will attest to, we had about 3 go-arounds with bond counsel
Yeah.
on how to do this and how they were looking at it, and, you know, kind of finally became very clear and what those limitations were. And I would say this, I understand that there's limitations, but I would also say, and Vicky's been in a lot of these calls too, that bond counsel has really bent over backwards to find a way to yes for most of these projects within the structure and the confines of what they have to do to sign off on the deals and to make sure that they're fit lawfully within the statute. So they have always tried to get us to yes. It's just not as easy as everybody thinks to get to yes sometimes, unfortunately.
Vicky? And then Jill.
I just want to add one comment about the cost of these projects and what the town is actually getting. In addition to constructing this project, they're getting an affordable housing restriction in perpetuity. These units are always going to have to be used for affordable housing. So if there is a sale or a foreclosure of these properties are going to have to be sold for the purpose of affordable housing, or the next developer is going to have to use it for affordable housing. So that is, you know, something that you're building on an inventory of affordable housing in perpetuity. And that's a valuable asset for the town as well. And I just wanted to add one other thing, and that's one of the reasons why when the question of the anti-aid amendment comes up is that although we're, you know, loaning funds for a project to a particular entity, it's also being loaned for a valuable public purpose, and that's the affordable housing restriction. So that's an important component to these. And bond counsel, you know, is always making sure that we're using these funds for the purchase of either real estate, construction, or an interest in real estate, namely an affordable housing restriction. So it's an important consideration to think about.
Thank you, Vicky. Jill?
So in some of those, did you all, this is most likely directed to you or Christie, but are you looking at leasing the land for more money? Is that part of what you're looking at as well? For especially for the
It's-
rental unit?
It's potentially a possibility, I think, in the way that we structure them. I think that we have sent some information to Hilltop on one that's kind of been percolating but hasn't done anything, and they've asked for numerous documents, and they're gonna help us come back and structure these. So it's very possible that it might be different in the amount of the ground lease, could potentially change in the RFP. That may be a way to do something. I hesitate to commit to any one particular structure just because every deal is so unique, every request and project is so unique that I don't think that there's a one size fits all solution to any of these on the list.
Yeah, I just think with the fairgrounds one, I mean, we didn't lease them for much and they still keep coming. And I know it's housing costs and COVID and the
No, and I
neighbors, I
think-
hear all that, but
Yeah.
you know,
I think that,
still $1.
no, I agree. I understand that. And I think that one, that one was put out a long time ago, and I think slightly different environment and, under slightly different circumstances than we are actually in right now. I think when that originally was put out, it was put out without the expectation that they were gonna come to the town for anything else, because they were given
Because
a
of that.
very favorable ground lease. And as we all know, things have dramatically changed, so I think that, it's something to take into consideration when we put the RFPs out now. Yes.
But sorry.
Peter and then Stephen?
Hearing all this is all great, but we're chasing our tail on all of this. I mean, we'll all be dead before we get to the number that we really
I
need
hope not.
to house people on this island. Is there any plans for any big projects? Like, is there any land that we could take by eminent domain, or is there any land that the town owns that we could put up 150 or 200 units?
Not currently,
Not that the
but,
town is currently, no.
but we are, again, to keep going back to Governor Healy's bill, there's a request to expedite the release of state-owned land to local municipalities for affordable housing. This is more relevant in towns that maybe have extra land around the MBTA or transportation communities. We want to be able to have that land available for housing. Here, we're always looking at what opportunity there might be from the state to release any land to us as well.
How many acres does the state own on Nantucket?
I don't know that answer.
A lot.
Bunch.
I mean, there's a
Just
state
not
forest, there's
conservation.
is it 100 acres behind Wanacon water?
20
It's only 20?
in
Okay,
that particular piece.
that connects Milestone, and
There's property all over the place.
they have a lot in over on Pulpus, I think they do too.
That's the part that I'm talking about across the street. There's actually a lot across the street from 31 Fairgrounds that is owned by, actually, maybe the feds, but there's scattered sites throughout the island. What is appropriate to build on is a whole different.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay, no, we have to do a time check here. We have
Okay.
further items that we have to get to tonight because we've got people waiting to get to them. And this is an important discussion, so I would have them come back, but is there anything urgent that anybody needs to have answered? Let's ask Christie or Brian now, and then I'm going to ask us to move on because Rob has to leave at 6, Joe's leaving at 5:30. We have to get to the STR stuff tonight because we've got people waiting. I can't keep pushing the bow wave, folks, on this stuff. So I will ask them to come back and we can spend more time on it. But we've already been at this point, 1 hour and 15 minutes on it. So I know there's still a lot of questions and it probably is a 3-hour discussion, but we don't have 3 hours today. Is how I look at this. And you can all yell at me later. I'm good with that. So Stephen, you had a question, and then after your question, I'm going to ask for the rest of this to be at a very soon future meeting, Christie. Perfect. So
Okay, so I'll go with one question. We have about 2,000 now tertiary dwellings, which are all occupied year round. Usually, in all the circumstances that I'm aware of, the other dwellings are also occupied year round, although that's not a requirement. Has there been any consideration about, or is it possible to put out a request for proposals for the people who own those properties and say, for this amount of money per unit, we'd like to buy a restriction. You only need to put an affordability restriction on one of the units. Presumably it would be the tertiary unit because it's already small and the rents are probably low, but all three of those units on that property would count on the shy list.
I think that's something that we've been considering, so we're looking at a year-round deed restriction that the trust has been developing over the past year. We have a home rule petition at town meeting, which there's a slide on this. But that would basically be a way for us to go to a homeowner and say, can we offer you some amount of money in exchange, put a year-round deed restriction, and the pilot program that the trust is developing would have an affordability restriction. So it would be used year-round and at a percent that's within the 240% AMI.
Right.
So that is something that we are developing and part of the request for funding and things that could be used for future to add to the housing stock.
But, which is great, and we do need that attainable level, but it doesn't get at the shy list. And then said I'd only have one question, so I'll just make a statement that maybe we ought to consider that 40B isn't the worst outcome. There are good 40Bs, so being outside safe harbor is not the boogeyman that maybe people think it is.
I agree.
Okay, well, with that, that is definitely the last sentence on that discussion. So Christy, thank you so much. This is,
Thank you all.
I really appreciate the format of
Great.
this.
It's very educational.
Very good, and we will have you back, trust me. And
Madam
she's like,
Chair, do
There wasn't much left
do
in
you
the
want to take up
presentation.
Article 20?
yes, let's go ahead and do 20 quickly.
Okay,
Thank you, thank you.
I was gonna say take that after, but that's later, along with the rest of the presentation, but that's.
Then you want to just do 20 now?
If the
It's-
committee's inclined, if
It's
you're
first on the
inclined.
list.
Why not?
So, okay, now we're on a discussion of warrant articles for annual town meeting 2024, and the first up is Article 20, appropriation for Affordable Housing Trust, which we just learned is $46.5 million, Brian.
We actually are asking for an authorization of 45 million based on the trust's commitment of approximately 3 million from the $6.5 million override. We, in consultation with Hilltop, have determined between principal and interest on the debt service payment right now, it comes out to about 45 million could be supported by a $3 million principal and interest debt service payment. Given the fact that we will most likely not immediately permanently borrow the majority of this, the remaining 1.5 million plus or minus from Christie's schedule would be able to be covered by the additional funds from the $6.5 million override.
Questions for Brian? Jill?
How are you gonna explain that at town meeting? Because that isn't gonna work. So that way,
We'll be able to explain it at town meeting. That will be okay. How I get the,
how you're getting
I'm
it,
going to explain it
Who's
tonight.
getting
There's
it?
people I think I still need to kind of work out in my head, but we'll be able to explain it.
okay.
Jeremy?
Just following on Jill's comment, Brian, you're taking a little more than half of the annual allocation and
Correct.
you are using it to access the debt markets, or at least have the approval to do such, to get $45 million of capital. I would imagine that people are going to immediately want to know use of proceeds.
And we would my first initial instinct, Jeremy, would be that we would discuss I don't remember what slide it is, with all the projects that are looming that equal $46 million. Is I think what we would do in doing that, in what we plan to do.
Okay,
Jill?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just my concern is the one big bite at the apple. I think we've seen people kind of push back on the big bite of the apple. We've also seen success with it, but at the $20 million level, I just haven't seen it at this level. So it's new for me, and I'm,
Understood.
I'm
Fair
looking
point.
at it too, just even with the short-term rental stuff, like I had to go back and take a smaller bite at that apple, like simply it takes a while.
Chris?
I think the expectation I've gotten from people who approach me about spending in this category is that this is where the transfer fee would come into
Potentially.
play for
Yeah.
some of this amount. And that they wouldn't be asked to swallow something like this until we had resolution on the transfer fee.
Okay.
I guess that's more of a statement than a question, but it's a statement to invite response, I guess.
But the override's already been passed, and that's what we're using to.
Right, so
service
this
that.
has no impact on any, this has no impact in
But we're just using,
a larger.
we're using half the override.
Right.
Yeah.
For this.
For this. And then we have some dry powder for other projects as they come up. And-
Okay, I think I misunderstood the math on that. I thought we were having to raise
No.
to match
so-
half of the override.
No, so the
Okay,
override is
fair enough.
6.5 million. We're using 3 million of the already approved override, permanent override.
This is what we want to use half.
This
the
is what we
override
want
for.
to use towards the debt
debt
service. So there's no
payments. Got it.
additional cost to the taxpayer in this scenario in any way, shape or form.
Got it. I
Already been
misunderstood the first
calculated.
Gotta get that
explanation.
across.
And I-
They
yeah,
need
So,
to borrow.
Yep, no, I got it.
Jeremy,
so
hold on.
Brian,
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead,
my
Jeremy.
turn? Oh,
Yes.
okay. So Brian, if I understood what was just said, you're saying that the 45 million of debt on top of the $3 million a year, to go to those half a dozen or so projects that you identified on as a possible use of funds,
Mhm.
that would then be non-recourse back to non-recourse debt back to the town?
Well, I'm
I
saying
don't see
that.
how that would quite work, but anyway, go on.
Well, so if you think about it from the perspective that we've already authorized $6.5 million of a permanent override. Every year, the transfer of $6.5 million of tax revenue goes to the Affordable Housing Trust. What I'm saying is they're pledging 3 million of that annual 6.5 million to this debt service. So there's no additional coverage response required from the taxpayer because it's already part of the $6.5 million coverage.
I got it. So the $3 million with sinking fund issues will be sufficient to defease the entire 45 million over time.
Yeah.
You know, my one concern is to pass this now as well. I'd follow what Peter was saying, and that is there a way to take the full 6 million and find a much bigger project to really solve a much bigger thing here? And that would be, I would love to have a longer conversation on that, which I know is Denise's a different time. But I worry that the use of proceeds description here is not going to be tight enough to pass muster at town meeting.
I would focus on the slide that showed how the $46 million was going to be spent. And then if people need more convincing, show them all those timelines when, you know, every number that we've looked at has exploded, some by over 100% in just a few years. So you better deploy the capital as quickly as you can.
Getting cheaper.
Well, it doesn't mean they're gonna kick it off that quick.
But it means they can. If they don't.
Yeah, but I
have
mean,
this
they're not.
money, then they can't. I mean, you'll choose one of these projects if you don't authorize this borrowing.
And this is the point, the borrowing has to be authorized by town meeting, otherwise they can't do the borrowing. Otherwise, it's just 6.5 million every year and you will, you know, it's 100 years before you get anywhere. Or maybe 50.
Well, and you're not locking yourself into a specific use of proceeds. You're just sort of, another way of looking at this is you're putting forward the concept of we're going to use leverage and we need approval to use such leverage.
Right.
Is that a right way to look at it, Brian?
Yeah.
Part two.
Joe? You're muted, Joe. You're muted.
What we're doing is we're leveraging part or half of the 6 million a year.
Right.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think we should look for a huge project because I don't think we want to be in the real estate business any more than we have to. But I do think to take 3 million at this interest rate level, if we can support 45 million and we have 46 million of projects, I think, but to explain it with the timelines and stuff, we'll lose them. And the best thing to say is that the town, the citizens have authorized 6 million and we're going to spend 3 million of it to borrow 45 million. And here's the use of proceeds. No more. I think that's fine.
I think we'll have you be the spokesperson at town meeting, Joe. I think you just volunteered. Joanna?
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I was gonna say what those guys said, so fine, keep going.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Yes.
Chris?
When we refer to it as a permanent override, I mean, we've described as a permanent override in terms of kind of how it's been presented, but there is nothing that actually makes it a permanent override, right, legally?
No, it was a permanent override to Proposition 2.5, so we, every
But
year,
the use of funds is not.
you're correct. The
Is
use of
not-
funds every year is not, the first year is the only year under Proposition 2.5 that has had to go to affordable housing.
Right.
But we made that commitment when we asked for the 6.5, much like we made the commitment with the 5 million for Ireland Home, that those is where they would be directed. That was town administration's commitment when we asked for those overrides.
Right, but town administration can't really make the commitment.
We can, to the extent that the current town administration sits in the chairs, yes.
Yeah, well.
A future one may decide to do something else and the voters could agree or not agree to do it, but that was what we presented and said to the board, that we needed the funds for these specific purposes, and that's why we're asking to override Proposition 2.5. And we told the board that was the commitment we made to the FinCom when we asked for your support on those. And so we have not deviated from that.
So to your point, Chris, this is the commitment for the length of this
Right,
borrowing.
right.
This is,
That's,
yes, you can't back out of that.
That I
No matter
understand,
who sits-
and that's
Right,
right,
that's true.
and that's why I think there will be conversation about the transfer tax. Not in the way I misunderstood it earlier, but in that context about the role of the transfer tax relative to the override.
Now, keep in mind though, I guess what I would say to you for that very quickly is if the transfer tax comes in and we don't need to do all of this borrowing, we won't do all the borrowing. Just because we could receive.
So we'll still do the
later.
borrowing, but the borrowing will be against the transfer tax, not against the
Or could be
override.
against that or not
Yeah.
against the override. I mean, or we may build up funds and not need to leverage all of the borrow. So we're looking for it now because we need to be able to finance our participation if it makes sense.
Brooke?
So I'll have two comments to the discussion. I've been working on this for low on 10 years now. I am not counting any chickens on a transfer tax to everybody in the room. We are as close as we have ever been, but it is still a political quagmire in Boston. I am not waiting around for that. We need to act now locally and borrow this money and keep the projects moving forward. It would be great, and it will be great if it happens, but let's not set policy on the hope that we're gonna get that transfer fee, just in general. And then the other thing, to Jeremy's point, large scale developments on Nantucket have two problems. There's no dirt, and there's a lot of oppositional political will against them. So we've thought long and hard about this as the trust has looked at acquiring the properties that we have acquired, is fitting things in under local zoning in various locations. Yes, it has additional costs and additional potential problems in terms of attracting developers and so forth, but it also slides in under what is acceptable to the community that, doesn't have a lot of, appeals of approvals and resistance. So there's a lot more to this. If I had a magic wand, I might do something different than what I think we're actually able to do. So.
Thank you, Brooke. Okay, any further,
Just one more question.
Jill?
Is there any, I know it says all of which shall be undertaken in conjunction with, but that doesn't mean it all is gonna go through the housing. It doesn't legally have to all go through AHTF, right?
Well, the $6.5 million transfer goes to Affordable Housing Trust.
No, I know, but all the borrowing goes back to them too, okay.
It's authorizing the trust to borrow $45 million.
Yeah, I just didn't know the way that was worded. It's, I didn't know if it could like all of a sudden be with a town employee housing or something like that, but can't, sounds like.
That would be separate, that we would come back for.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion, Peter?
Motion to adopt?
No, motion,
Okay, then,
motion to adopt the Article 20 as written.
Jeremy,
Second.
that,
Oh, we did?
All right. people, you're killing me today.
First day,
So-
yeah.
All right. All right, so we have a motion to adopt. Any further discussion on the motion? And seeing no hands raised, I'm going to go by roll call. Jeremy,
Aye.
thank you. Joe,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Denise, aye, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Brian.
job.
That's right.
You're not
Thanks,
leaving.
Brian.
I'm not leaving, I'm gonna go sit in the back though.
Okay, you go sit in the back. All right. So now we are on Article 34. Select Board for the Community Preservation Committee Appropriation Fiscal Year 2025 Budget Community Preservation Committee. And Maria's pulling up the article.
I have.
And Kathy, are you the person speaking for this today?
Lena and Mark are here too.
Okay. Kathy, you're muted.
With sign language.
Hi, this is Glenna Stokes Scarlett.
Okay, Glenna, thank you.
Mark had to leave, and so on behalf of the chair, Ken Bogrand, and Mark Bill, vice chair, we are presenting the fiscal year 2025 Community Preservation Committee article. These recommendations for the fiscal year 2025 CPC article were discussed and appropriated earlier this year and late last year. And what you have before you are all the projects that came to the CPC office for funding for the upcoming fiscal year.
Glenna, let me interrupt you for a minute. Joanna, are you about to recuse?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
am. I have to recuse, apply for funds. Thank you. I don't want to screw this up.
Yes, you have to go dark, Joanna. You have to come
Okay,
off.
got it.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Joanna. Sorry, Glenna, go ahead.
Sure. And so as you see before you, we have historic preservation, which is, we typically get a lot of articles for historic preservation. That's one of our big ask. Landmark House for $305,580, and Nantucket Historical Association for $240,949. Nantucket Historical Association again for $938,751. And while you may see Nantucket Historical Association twice, they are for separate projects. One is for the old mill and one is for the Hadwin and Barney Oil and Candle Factory, pardon me. Next we have the Nantucket Mariah Mitchell Association for $167,060. And then Town of Nantucket with Preservation Institute Nantucket for $50,000. Town of Nantucket with Preservation Institute Nantucket again for $60,000. And this again is one of those projects or one of the organizations that have more than one project under it. Nantucket Athenaeum for $12,000. South Church Preservation Fund for $55,000. Then we have St. Mary's, Our Lady of the Isle Catholic Church. The first one is for $259,475.81. And then we have $718,991.50, again for St. Mary's, Our Lady of the Isle Catholic Church. And one is for the exterior and historic Victorian. The other one is for the exterior of historic structure known as St. Mary's Rectory. We move on to Remain 58 LLC for $11,000, and then the Hospital Thrift Shop for $21,000. Nantucket Cemetery Commission for $150,000. Next, we have Community Housing for Nantucket Interfaith Council for $360,000. And then Open Space Conservation and Recreation, Nantucket Racket Sports Association for $356,507.69. The Linda Loring Foundation for $93,685. And Community Preservation Committee Administrative and Operating Budget at $200,000, which brings our total to $4 million. And you will see the sources where the money was raised and appropriated from fiscal year 24, CPC surcharge of $3,056,608, and from state matching funds for fiscal year 25 to be received in 24, $850,000, and from interest, $93,392, which again brings us to $4 million.
Thank you, Glenn. I don't think you even breathed during all of that. So thank you very much. Questions from the committee, and I want to know, Chris, why the hospital needs $21,000 from CPC.
It's not the hospital. The hospital thrift shop's a separate 501c3. We don't, I have no idea what.
Maybe they'll put heat in. I want to know why Remain needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Me
it.
too.
Kathy,
Could
go
I
ahead.
say, yeah, I just wanted to say that during COVID times, we didn't receive a lot of requests. This year, we are really hitting our stride. They're wonderful requests this year. And some of them are pretty vital. The one at the Unitarian Church, which is the South Church, they're having a problem with their bell, could fall down. And over at the Landmark House, if you know anyone over there, they've got to replace their elevator so people can get up to the second floor for their homes. But I just wanted to say that I've been looking at this for 20 years, and I thought that this was one of our best years for applicants.
Thank you, Kathy.
Here's a question. Landmark House, it says 25 apartments for 25 Nantucketers. Out of that 20, I don't know how many apartments are there. Is it 25 apartments?
I don't know.
Yes, it's 25 quality units for older and disabled Nantucket
Are there any
residents.
that are not quality? Is that the all of them thing?
Not that we know of, none that
Okay,
we're aware
my
of.
question is there anybody living in them that's not from Nantucket?
Not that I know
No.
of. I believe that it is Nantucket residents only.
I mean, it's not what I've been told, but might be worth looking into. Because it stipulates it's for Nantucket only, that's why I'm saying that. Otherwise, I wouldn't care, but I hear people have been sent over from the mainland to live there.
It's probably not appropriate
No.
for this meeting.
Well, it's just, it stipulates something in the article, it's wrong, maybe.
No,
That's all.
it's for an elevator in a building.
Yeah, but it stipulates it's for 25 people from Nantucket. But it said on the.
I think more to the point, it's for an elevator in a building where the operator of the building has promised the town over and over that they wouldn't come back to us for more money. And we look at CPC money like it's free, and it's not.
Right.
This is primarily a
Tax.
3% surcharge on
Right.
all of our property tax bills.
Yes.
And it's, it's going again, like what we did this, was it 7 or 8 years ago? They wanted $500,000 for windows, and they
Windows,
said,
right.
we'll never come back to you. They came back the very next year for $200,000.
Yeah.
Wait.
Lynn, you're thinking of Academy Hill.
I
Yeah,
am, you're
Academy
yeah,
Hill.
you're right. I'm confused.
Yeah.
That was Academy Hill.
But we've had a similar discussion about how much money we spend on churches, for example.
Mhm.
And now there's money here for Remain, which is a relatively small amount of money, but I think it's something we talk about every year. And Chris, you usually bring it up, so I apologize for doing your thunder, but we really ought to schedule a review of where this money's going and how many of these projects would not be funded through any portion of tax dollars if we didn't have this 3% surcharge applied to all of our bills. Some of these, I think a lot of these projects would not qualify for funding through the general fund.
By the way, these are all reimbursement. So the projects will have been done and they seek reimbursement after the fact, is my understanding of how it works.
That's
correct.
Jeremy.
That's correct.
I don't know what that means.
Means that somebody
Yeah,
spent
they
the money,
have to
they
catch
they
it.
submitted a
Yeah,
bill.
but they don't, but they don't like say, we already did this work, and no, they said, if you promise that you'll give us the money when we complete the project, then we'll start the project now.
So what's the committee's preference here? Do you need to do a deep dive on the CPC and how it works before we can approve this article or not approve this article?
Not in February, not 2 months before town meeting, we don't.
I mean, I'm starting to get a little cranky, as we can see, about, I get that we have the absolute right to make these questions, and we don't really have the absolute right to make them in hour 23. That's my challenge in trying to get us through.
That's what I just said.
So I know that's why you said that. You and I, you're good.
But we didn't see it until hour 23.
I definitely think this is the forum to raise the point, though. I don't think Stephen's out of line in terms of
No, I
raising
don't
that
think
point.
anybody's
So I think
out of raising it.
I think we always come back to a misconception about what the CPC is, that it's kind of like free money,
Right.
and it's not. It's
No,
on all
it's not.
property tax bills.
No one, I mean,
Well, Lena, how many projects did you get requests for this calendar year for the $4 million? And did you turn anybody down?
Is that question to me?
yes,
Or-
Glenna, it is.
Oh, yeah, and my name is Glenna. Okay, you said
Oh,
Lena.
Glenn, sorry.
So I believe this year we received 17 projects. And when we receive the projects, they are basically applications that we take in for review and consideration from the entire Community Preservation Committee. And once we find that they have all the pieces in place, they come in for a interview, and then we go through a first round and second round deliberation. The first round will determine whether all of the pieces are in place and whether their project is allowable. And then during the second deliberation, we determine how much each organization will be funded. And it all depends on what's in their application and, again, what is deemed allowable. Not everything is allowable when it comes to Community Preservation Committee funds. And I heard someone say that it's like free money, and it's not
thing is
free
gonna
money.
die. I need to
So,
get it
so
started
Glenna,
on it.
how many projects passed muster that were allowable under the law? And then from that, you picked these. How many were those?
Well, we received 17. Let's say we received 17. As long as all of the pieces are in place, then they are allowable. It doesn't matter. There's been years where we received 25. During COVID, we only received 6. So the number of projects, it does not matter how many we receive. It could be anywhere from 1 to 100, and so we
No, I understand. Of the ones that are right here in front of us today,
Sure.
were there any that were acceptable legally that you turned down?
No, we did not turn down any.
Okay, so this is 100% of the ones that applied that passed all the requirements.
Yes, that is how the commissioner saw it. Yes.
Jill?
This has a committee
Yes.
that people that we value in this community who have been appointed by the select board and who are members of other committees by right get to be on this committee. I trust them, and I motion to adopt.
Okay. Jill boldly went to a motion.
Well, you were looking for it.
I was looking
I'll
for it.
second it.
Peter seconded. Further discussions on the motion? No further discussion, then roll call. Joanna?
Jeez.
Oh, that's right. You were.
Recuse.
Never mind. Jeremy? Jeremy?
Aye.
Thank you. Jill?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Denise, I thank you. I do think it's worth taking a deeper dive look at this, especially for the people who say, we'll never ask you again. I do think that's worthwhile. And so maybe it's, at some point, we have a joint meeting with the CPC committee and then talk about it that way. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, but
And-
they don't
and
control who
Denise-
applies.
Jeremy, hold on a second. Chris has got his hand raised.
Separately, I'd like to understand from town council what the steps would be to, for us to remove ourselves from the program.
So from the CPC.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
So-
go, John, hold on a second.
I think you meant for another day. Did you?
Yeah, no, yeah, I didn't mean for today. I meant
Yeah.
as part of that analysis.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. Go ahead, John.
It's very quickly, you get out of the CPC the same way you got into it, which is a town meeting vote, and then a ballot question at the next annual meeting held, annual town election. So it's a two-step process to withdraw. It's also a two-step process to reduce the percentage of the surcharge.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
John. Joanna?
I don't think she has a question.
Okay, Joanna, your hand's raised, but Jeremy, did you have a question?
It's just, it seems that $200,000 is a lot of money to spend just to figure out that projects fit within a program that we're going to fund 100% of such.
Thank you for that. Okay, anything else? Moving on to Article 35.
Oh, I wanted to say something.
Oh,
Not about the
okay.
vote, but about the CPC. I just want to say that I think that Chris and Stephen, we've been on doing this for a while, and we did have the CPC come in and talk through their whole process with us. And there have been many years where they couldn't give away all the money that they had. So I tend to agree with the fact that, listen, if this mechanism's in place, and it's great that people came forward and applied, but if we're going to start to question, the reasons and the where-tos, I think that the review would need to be, I appreciate the question, but I would want to really understand what would be the benefit of not doing it.
Well, as somebody who receives money from it, maybe you shouldn't opine. I think there's a reason you just had to recuse.
Well, yes, because it was the right thing to do, but there have been many years where I sat on this committee and had nothing to do with getting any of the money.
Okay, and this year you do, so it makes sense that you'd want to protect that funding source.
Okay, all right. I'm drawing a line under this conversation, so.
So
Yeah, no, I was suggesting for later, absolutely.
Yes. Drawing a line under this.
You just had to throw that grenade.
Okay, Article 35. Budget transfers, fiscal year appropriation, community preservation committee, fiscal year 2025 budget transfers.
I'm sorry, Maria,
Yes,
are we done with CPC, the article? Was
oh,
our-
this is CPC, but you have no,
They're done. There's no budget
yeah,
transfers.
there's no budget transfer, so you're done. Yeah, this is,
Thanks, Glenna. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks for stepping in. Thank you,
Sure.
Kathy.
thanks, Lena. And Lynette.
Okay, all right, so take no action. May I have a motion?
So
Okay, thank you. Roll call, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Aye.
Hi.
Chris?
Aye.
Rob? Stephen?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Okay, Denise, aye. Okay. Motion take no action. Next. All right, is on the next article, which is zoning map change lug 2 to R20 25 Rugged Road. We had this discussion with Leslie when she came to us for the planning for the zoning articles. And I remember we asked if we could postpone this and then talk about it later. Is anyone here to speak on behalf of this article?
Leslie's here, but
Okay. Thank you, Leslie, for being here. Anybody in the audience here? No, okay.
But, Matt?
Yes, please.
But we did have the chance to go back and watch the planning board meeting, which I think was a big part of why we asked to continue it, was so we
Yes.
could get smarter about it.
Yes, and
So
I didn't. So I'm
okay.
not smarter, but I'm happy to listen to all
I
of
can tell,
you smarter.
I can tell you what they said.
Yes, that would be perfect.
No, I mean, I was satisfied that they followed a process. It wasn't unanimous. I think it's a tough call, but I was satisfied that it's the planning board's call, and it answered some of the questions I had. It did raise questions about the covenant program, because I think the main question we had was, why not a covenant house or two covenant houses on the lot as opposed to the change in the zoning? The answer kind of was the planning board got comfortable with it. That wasn't going to close the gap in value. So it did raise some questions that maybe others here could answer, but I know we're running low on time around, like, where does the covenant program stand in terms of is there too big a gap in terms of that program being attractive right now? But we can pull that off to later. That's the question it raised in my mind. I was satisfied that the planning board did their work, and I would support the planning board.
Okay. I didn't watch it, so I'm going to put my hand up that I didn't watch it, and that I will listen to my learned colleagues here and get their understanding and what they think about this.
My points tonight are the same as they were last time. You know, we created the allowance for covenant lots, and then we improved upon that by saying large lots like this one can have two covenant lots, and we did it for a reason.
Yeah.
And this type of zoning change undermines that work and the work that we're doing to promote affordable housing or attainable housing, or I guess it's attainable when you talk about 150% and covenant lots, but you know, those would be created if not for this zoning change. You know, I have had it explained to me that there's economic hardship here and that the value of the covenant lots is not sufficient. Well, it's better than not being able to sell any piece. And so there can certainly be 2 year-round families here or one. That's better for the community than the chance that it won't be a year-round family.
All right. Jill? Oh, you
Can I ask Stephen a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hasn't she come up every year for this?
Just once before.
There's only once. I thought it was been twice.
I think it was just once.
Ones that I remember. But this is at least the second time it's been up, let's put it this way.
Definitely. I don't remember the planning board supporting that last time.
They didn't.
Was it the exact same thing the last time, carving? I mean, because this is a weird one, right? It's changing the zoning on a portion of the lot. This is not something we see very often.
Right. Leslie, are you?
I don't have the old warrant or the old map, but as I recall, the last time the zoning map change was for the whole parcel. And the planning board, I think it talked about carving out a piece, but that ended up not being supported at town meeting either way.
And I've forgotten the planning board's motion on this, I'm sorry.
On this, the planning board's motion was positive, and as Mr. Glowacki said, I believe it was a 3-to-1 vote, 3 in favor, 1 opposed.
So to allow this to happen.
Yes, and this one, I have the wrong copy of the warrant in front of me. I have the warrant, but not the warrant with planning board motions. But I'm fairly certain this one does have a 50% voting threshold at town meeting because of housing choice.
Why is housing choice part of this?
Okay.
She said that last time.
So.
Ask a question.
Sure.
Why would a zoning change that has no affordability component be subject to the 50% threshold of housing choice?
Just more density. But Leslie, you know which 9 if this one triggered?
If I had the right version of the motions in front of me, I would, but I'm just trying to find them real quick on the computer. But just while I'm looking to explain, housing choice is part of a broader legislation that was adopted that changes MGL 48 Section 5. And if certain criteria are met, then the voting threshold goes from 2/3 to a simple majority. And one of those criteria is a change in setbacks and ground cover, and that's why this one would qualify. But I will look for the exact criteria while you all continue to talk.
And but may I?
Yes,
so
go ahead,
I'm
Chris.
recalling things now from the planning board conversation. That was not the case in the prior case, and it did receive more than 50% of the vote. So part of the thinking here on the part of the planning board was this is going to pass at over the 50% threshold, because it did last time. Now, who knows? But so just so you're aware, the last time when it did not pass a town meeting,
Didn't hit the
it did
2/3.
receive more than 50% of the vote, but it didn't hit the 2/3.
Okay,
If that.
Yeah. And on that, the last time that legislation was brand new and the planning board didn't know about the exact process that has to be followed as far as determining exactly which of the 9 criteria are met and putting it in the motion printed in the warrant. So at that particular town meeting, none of the articles qualified because of that.
I guess I'm surprised that the planning board made a positive motion on this. Because this just seems like spot zoning. I know you're gonna tell me it's not, but that's what it seems like.
That's part of a lot.
It's next to 40B.
May I ask?
Sure, Brooke.
Just quickly, is the owner a year-round resident or a seasonal resident?
Year round.
Okay, so here's the thing, with the qualified family member exemption, she could move into one of the covenant houses with no income or asset restrictions. So if there's a financial hardship here, she could sell off the main part of the lot and a covenant lot and move into a covenant house on that property and be financially just fine.
Maybe she likes her house.
Just, I'm saying,
Thank you, Brooke.
that's an option.
So,
Yeah.
just
go
to be
ahead.
clear, I don't necessarily agree one way or the other, but I have a pretty high threshold for going against the planning board, although some people think not high enough. And I just was satisfied that all of this was really thoroughly discussed. And
Yeah.
that was really what my question was, and going back to look at it, including the covenant piece, and there was quite a bit of back and forth on that. So that's where I got satisfied,
Yep,
but
no, that's
I
fine.
get the concerns.
I mean, we've only disagreed with the planning board once
Mhm.
in the time I can remember since I've been on FinCom. So, and that was about swimming pools. So,
I just want to make the point that the planning board didn't have to vote to approve $45 million in borrowing for housing on the same night that they looked at this. So,
Mhm.
you know,
Good point.
that's a consideration.
yeah. Yeah. So further discussion, or can we go to a motion?
Motion to adopt as the planning board recommends.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so Peter made the motion, second, further discussion on the motion? Okay, let's see, I think Joe is left. Jeremy?
Aye.
Okay, oops, hold on a second. I have to do aye and nay for this one because I know there's gonna be at least one nay. Okay, Jill,
No.
Chris,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Stephen,
No.
Peter?
Aye.
Who did I forget?
Yourself.
Me, no.
Joe, right?
Oh, no, me too.
Joanna? Joanna?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
all right, thank you. And Joe's gone, I believe. He had to leave at 5:30. Okay. All right, so that passed 5-3 to support the planning board motion. Okay.
At least one 4-4, Denise.
Pardon?
At least it wasn't 4-4.
Oh, yeah,
You would
that
have fun with that. You would have been mad.
No, I would have just left. At that point, I'm like, okay, I'm done. All right, Anne, you're up. And Anne, in your best interest, keep this as simple as possible. How are you?
All right.
Good.
There you go.
Good. Explain this to us like explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Yes.
That's
I'm
what I need.
Krista, private citizen employed by Housing Nantucket. This is a inclusionary zoning article, so we all have been talking and discussing expenditures for affordable housing. This is something that requires a developer to include a middle income unit when 5 units or more are being created. So it would be a middle income is defined as 240% AMI and below. So it's that attainable housing, that's a gap that we don't have any programs that serve that income level. And it's at no cost to the town except for monitoring and whatnot. So it's on the developer's dime to create the housing. So That's, I don't know how much more you want me to get into, but if a lot is subdivided into 5 or more pieces, then one of the lots would need to be destined for year-round ownership by an income qualified household. If there's 5 or more units, one would be a income qualified unit, rental unit. And if commercial space is developed of greater than 5,000 square feet, then one rental unit would need to get created for that. So that's the premise. There's already about 200 and change communities across the Commonwealth that do it. Usually communities do it for below 80% AMI, but here it's this 240% AMI because we felt like that was a level where it wasn't that much of an encumbrance for the developer because the price that they're able to charge for the unit is much higher. It's, you know, in the range of $1 million, maybe more. And the qualified income is about $325,000 for a household of 4. So, and I'm talking about the $1 million price point is like for a 3-bedroom today, and with these interest rates. So I'll just leave it at that and let it open for question. Yes,
Peter?
Yeah, how many projects were done in the past year that had 5 lots on it or 5 units?
I can't answer that question. I could get back to you.
Well, my reason is I don't think there's very many.
Yes,
So, I mean, are we passing something that really is not gonna have any impact?
we've considered this. And there are limited number of lots that are available, but we figured that it's better to have it on the books because there are some that are available. Like, for example, on Rugged Way, there were some that were developed over there, and Leslie maybe can answer on the number, the exact number, but we worked with the planning board members like Dave Iverson and others who kind of looked at how many more there would be, and we felt like this was the better approach to just have it on the book.
No, I agree with that. I don't think it's gonna have much impact, because unfortunately, there's not that many developments going up. That's.
Other questions, Chris?
So for the committee, Ann and I have been having our own conversation about this. Because for very large employers who have a very complex labor situation, who are looking to make very big swings to help in housing, this is a real problem. Having to comply with this. And as I now understand it, you know, everybody would have to comply with it that would develop over 5 units. And I can't speak for other large employers. I can tell you for the hospital, this would be a really big difficulty. And I know the first thing people think is, well, it's only limited to 240 AMI. That's a ton of money. You should be able to fit people in. But now you're talking about treating people differently. All the union issues we talked about in the town, the hospital has all of those. We move people in and out of housing. If you want a locum surgeon to be here and for the 2 weeks that Dr. O'Connor's away and you need surgery in a hurry, you're going to want the hospital to have housing units that can house them. So we've talked a little bit about whether there's a way to address that.
Can't you have
for
exemption
nonprofits.
for like?
And I wonder about the town as well.
Yeah.
Is the other one.
It's the
All
opposite.
municipal.
Because they're the other big, you know, they're the other big employer is why I think of them. I don't know about other employers. But this would be a real problem for the hospital's plans to try to address housing in Nantucket.
Right, and as Chris mentions, we talked about that. And I talked to the people on the vineyard, and there are exemptions in some of what they're doing too for nonprofits or municipalities. So still exploring that, but I don't have an answer for you right now as far as amending the language.
Okay,
But I think the question would be if we can figure that out, can it get into the planning board's motion? Is it
Correct.
possible to
Planning
go back
board
and get it into the planning board
Correct.
motion? Because otherwise we just have to have this conversation on the town meeting floor, and I don't know how that goes, but I know where the hospital will have to go. And by the way, we think it's a great idea otherwise, because
Right.
obviously some of the benefit of this would likely accrue to hospital employees and other important services. But in terms of being part of the solution, it would be a real hardship for us.
does it have to be on the property? So I have 5, I can do 5 units and I build 5 units and then I have somewhere else, I can build a 6 unit, or I build 4, whatever. And then I build the one that you want me to build somewhere else? Does it
Yes.
have to be
No,
contiguous?
no, it's within a mile, I believe.
Oh, well, it's.
Yep.
Big one.
Yeah, okay,
And that's still a $10 million problem for us to do
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, I was
get
just
the
trying to
scale.
think of,
And then the only, may I continue?
please.
The other question that's not specific to the large employers, just the question I have about it, and we talked about this a little bit as well, is for rentals, you have to recertify every year. And I understand that in other affordability programs, if you go above the income level, I think this is how I understand what you told me, you're likely to go into just another strata. So your rent will change, but you won't lose your housing. But in this case, since there's no strata above you, we're talking about people earning their way out of their housing if they were to become more successful. Or, encouraging them to be fraudulent. And I just get really uncomfortable with sort of capping people's limitations in this market on Nantucket, because if you were to earn your way out of this housing, in most places, you'd say, well, move to the next town and buy a beautiful house. You're making a lot of money. In this town, we all know you don't have that option. You could end up dropping off a cliff and forcing someone out of their housing if they improve their situation. So that, I don't know how to solve that, but that's the other thing in here that makes me uncomfortable.
Leslie?
Oh, I just wanted to build on, I think Chris just mentioned this, or maybe it was someone else, about a possible change to the planning board's motion. I did have a sort of last minute phone call with Anne this afternoon, and we talked about that possibility, but I think with the timing of the adoption of the motions and the printing of the warrant and all of that, I don't think there will be time to re-advertise and have a new hearing for the planning board. I mean, potentially one could be squeezed in, but I know how everyone feels about the schedule. So that would be deviating from the schedule. So, I think it's kind of late to start making significant changes to the language of the article, at least for the warrant. And Anne and I had talked about, a potential amendment coming from her at town meeting. I don't know. There's just my thoughts, at least as it goes to changing the planning board's motion at this time.
Yeah, March 12th is the drop dead date for motions, for recommendations rather. So, there's still a little bit of time. But if the planning board only meets monthly, is that correct, Leslie?
They only meet monthly. I mean, they're open to special meetings, but we have statutory requirements for advertising. So
Yeah.
that's really what drives the timeline, not so much whether they're willing to meet or not.
Okay, no, I know it's a ability versus will. I know they would always be happy to help. Planning board, love them. So, okay.
May I address
Yes, go
Chris's
ahead.
question?
Yes, of course. Go ahead,
So
Ann.
about aging or incoming out, we did think about that also, but because the income level was so high that it was thought that then one could afford a market rate home at that point, since this is the highest strata of income assistance that one would get.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just think on Nantucket, the likelihood is you still have a problem if you've earned out of that and may not have an option. So I didn't know if there was, if there were a way to say you have to be in that category for 2 years and then you're grandfathered in or something, or some other way that you're not putting a gun to people's head every year if they happen to have a good year,
Okay. Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I just make a suggestion? My understanding was that a property, like when we talk about Tacoma Green, right, having these different income levels, that when people certify and they income out of a unit, that the property owner then has to identify the next available unit and tag that. So it could be like within 6 months or a year, you'd have to identify a different unit as being the one that qualifies, right? And likely among all your units, if somebody income qualifies out, there's another unit where someone is income qualified at under 240% AMI, right? So potentially you could just assign a different unit to the restriction. I don't know whether that's a possibility in a larger scale.
Well, what happens to the person who's
They
earned out?
stay.
But they stay and go to market?
No. They stay and you can charge whatever you want, but what you're saying is then if apartment A is the qualified unit, right? And the tenants of apartment A are 245%.
Yeah.
You could find another apartment that has a tenant that's under 240% AMI and reassign that as the unit that meets the requirement.
So they would get a reduction in rent.
It's not attached.
No, they would go to market.
They go to market.
It's when
Yeah.
it turns over, but that works well at something like Tacoma Green. I don't think in this scenario where maybe they have 5 units, 4 of them are market rate, and 1 of them's restricted.
Right, and I was thinking of the hospital as a larger, looking at a larger.
The hospital's gonna hold it, those are really 2 separate issues for me. I wasn't worried about someone aging out at the hospital. I was worried about all this myriad of issues we have.
Yes.
In some cases, we, because of healthcare law, we have to charge market rate. We can't give someone a below market rate unit. For a whole bunch of complex reasons. So,
Exempting the hospital.
and the union piece, and I mean, you know, cards on the table, I think it's probably clear. We are trying to do something of really significant scale to try to, you know, be part of the solution here. And this would be a real problem.
So is there a way forward? And I'm looking to John Giorgio. Hi, John. If he's still there?
Yes.
Yes. John, is there a way that if we made a motion to support the planning board with the amendment that the hospital is exempted from this?
I don't think that would be possible, no.
Okay, all right. It's a planning board motion. That's, you know, so we either support it or we don't. Is the finance committee, and you're voting, the voters are voting on what the planning board recommended, not what we recommend. So for this, for any zoning article. Okay. It's worth trying. So, other, Rob, didn't you have to leave?
I bought a little more time.
Okay, all right, thank you. You're just dying for the STR part. I know. So, any other comments?
Do we have to make a motion to support or not support planning board?
I think we can just not say anything.
Yeah, let me just not.
Can we, are we able to, John, just not say anything on this one, pass over it?
Yes,
So motion to pass over? Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, yes, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to say anything in the motion booklet if that's the will of the finance committee.
Is that the preference of the finance committee?
May I ask, would people support a motion to not support with a comment?
I would, no.
I would. I'd support,
Yeah, I would support that.
to not support with a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd support that.
So make the motion.
I will make the motion to not support, and I would add that I would suggest that we add a comment explaining the specific situation, supporting an amendment. Should it be made?
Okay. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, further discussion on that motion? I'm gonna do the ayes and nays here. Hold on a second, because we're not gonna be 100%.
I have some discussion on that motion. I appreciate broadly what you're saying, Chris, but I don't know enough about it to know if that's important enough to the town. I mean, the hospital is obviously very important to the community, but this is a town committee, and I don't know that jeopardizing the passage of this article is warranted here. I mean, maybe it is, but I don't know enough of the details.
I guess I might phrase it differently, that the article as written, I believe, has a lot of unintended consequences that haven't been fully fleshed out. And that's why I think the article shouldn't pass as written.
I agree.
And I think it's more than just the hospital.
Yeah, well, I think the effects are intended. They're meant to cost money for developers. You know, I think that's a feature, not a bug.
Did the, Leslie, how long did the planning board discuss this article?
That was at least a month ago. I'm not sure exactly. There was some discussion. I think generally speaking, the planning board supported it enough to give it a positive recommendation and to allow the voters to discuss it and to not stand in the way of the inclusionary housing discussion at town meeting.
Thank you.
I did send around the link and the time codes on the 2 times they discussed it.
Yeah, and as I told you, I didn't
Yeah.
watch either one, so, yeah. And I still haven't watched either one. So, no, I was just curious. And so what was their discussion on this one then, Chris?
It was very brief. It was a very strange discussion. You can go back and look at it if you like.
I may now have to just.
There was a first discussion where they were like, well, we're gonna have to think about this and come back and talk about it, was kind of the discussion. And so then I had a really hard time finding the second time they talked about it, because I expected it to be a lengthy discussion. It was about 2 minutes. Nobody had any questions and they just voted it through.
Okay,
On the second, that's the second link I sent.
so we have a motion on the table, motion not to support the planning board. With a comment that frankly Chris would have to write, as if it's that wins, if you will. That explaining why the finance committee voted that in the majority. That's what's on the table.
What is going to be our commentary on why?
My comment, the comment I'm suggesting would be that the finance committee would support the motion if amended by the sponsor. And we'll have to talk about what that amendment, what the form of that amendment would be. Because I think the sponsor has offered to go back to the planning board. We just don't have time to do it. The sponsors thereafter offered to make an amendment. And what I'm suggesting is that we are supporting with that amendment and not supporting without the amendment.
Libby?
Just clarification, you're not really gonna have a motion, are you? It's just gonna be finance, if you're gonna proceed on like this, it's just gonna be finance committee comment, the committee does not support the planning board motion, and then you proceed.
Correct.
Correct, yeah, we're not making a motion.
I was using
Yeah.
motion incorrectly, yes, but yes.
That's okay, just
realize
wanna
it.
make sure, thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no. Fine. It's just a finance committee observation. Okay, so Rob, go ahead,
Can we
just
complete
skip
the
it.
process with an incomplete amendment? You know, as amended, like that standard practice, you can go out.
Yeah, no,
We do it.
No, we can't. It's, no. I think that from my perspective, I would rather, Anne, are you willing to make an amendment on town meeting floor to exempt whoever needs to be exempted? I'm putting you on the spot.
Right.
If you can't answer that right now, then don't answer it
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now.
the intention isn't to try to penalize the hospital or the municipality, so it's really to try to capture these units that are being built in the open market. So I think I'm open to discussing with my own team
Okay.
and then town council perhaps, or someone to make an amendment that would be appropriate and in line with what the Vineyard does, for example.
Okay, then, can you come back in March 5th or 7th and
Yes.
we'll find out, because I would rather, so to that end, the recommendation and because I'd rather do it when we know concretely what we're all saying yes or no to.
No, I'm happy to withdraw my motion if we're gonna
Okay,
come back and do it for time.
all right, because I'm uncomfortable to make a recommendation or even a support or not support of the planning board without knowing concretely what we're gonna get to. Okay,
I
so you
withdraw my motion.
withdraw, are you withdrawing your second?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right.
All right, that makes sense. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, Anne. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your patience. Okay, Brooke, come on the main table, please. You are going to be the person, well, John Giorgio.
John's doing it.
Yes, I know, but come on up, Brooke. We're missing you from just talking from the cheap seats, and Stephen had to recuse.
Right, is this the, is there something else after this?
Yes, we're gonna do lots of more things, Stephen. No, 60, 61, and then that's it.
Right.
I'm gonna-
And we're
You-
doing it, you have to leave now, right? That's what
Yeah,
I
you
saw
do.
when I watched last
You
night,
do
the select
have
board
to,
meeting
yes.
about, you have to leave when you recuse yourself now, leave the room.
Sure, people have a
Yeah.
quorum.
I'm not even a member of NAREP, make a
Jeremy.
mistake.
See, 1,
Because people will
2,
read your
3,
face.
4.
Yeah.
Jeremy and Joanna.
Okay, Jeremy and Joanna, you can stay for the duration, otherwise you won't have a quorum.
Hover, so you don't hover over people.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Very threatening visit.
Thank you.
Yeah, very
Okay,
threatening.
thank you. All right.
Actually,
Almost there.
Oh, you can't.
thanks for sticking around.
This one
Pick
should
us
be
up on the
easy.
Zoom.
It should.
John. Giorgio.
Yes. What would you like?
So, I sent out an email today, which I CC'd you on, which explained Brooke as well, and Michael Popko and Stephen Cohen, explaining what happened on the 14th. And that, in summary, The sponsors for 61 and 62 have agreed to, that their article would be take no action from the finance committee. And that 60 would be the one supported by the finance committee with the motion that's up on the, with the motion that's up on the screen. And this was the compromise version, and people really did work to compromise. I have to say, I was very impressed with the three parties holding hands.
Right.
Kumbaya. It was a kumbaya moment.
Oh, good.
And no, it was very constructive because honestly, they were starting in pretty different positions. And I was very impressed with everybody's effort on this. So John will take you through what the final compromise
Okay.
looks like.
So
And go ahead,
oh,
John.
sorry about that. So the
That's okay.
consensus, the consensus was that the group would start with the select board's article because it was it would require the fewest number of revisions. So what we did was in the select board article, the motion would essentially in the purpose and intent section, which you see on the screen, would retain the first purpose and then add three more, which were actually contained in Attorney Cohen's petition. So and then the remaining purposes in the select board version would not be included. We felt some of those were, the group felt that some of those might be controversial, and not everyone agreed with some of those findings. So we would have findings 1, 2, 3, and 4 that is shown on the screen. Maria, could you go to the next page, please?
Good, you got rid of a lot of
Yeah. So we, obviously we'd include the definition of corporation, which it would be new to the bylaw. That is the same definition that we had in the version that was presented to town meeting in November. Can you continue down, please? We changed the definition of, if you recall, the select board motion had timeshare, time interval, and fractional ownership. And we decided that the fractional ownership piece was not ready for prime time, so to speak, and that it would be best to just have a definition of time sharing or time interval ownership dwelling units. And Attorney Cohen pointed out, and I think he was correct, that the best way to approach this would be to include the definition of time sharing or time interval ownership that's currently contained in the zoning bylaw. So that's that change. If you could continue to go down, thank you. Keep going. Keep going. And then stop there, please. So H is the provision that prohibits dwelling units owned by a corporation from engaging in short-term rentals. It retains the language that we had in the November bylaw, which essentially permits short-term rentals in dwelling units owned by an LLC, trust, or S corporation, but only where every shareholder, partner, or member of the legal entity is a natural person. So this one would essentially ban corporate ownership of short-term rentals. And then subsection I prohibits affordable or income restricted units from being offered, from obtaining essentially a certificate of registration for short-term rental. And then J is the provision that prohibits short-term rentals in time sharing or time interval ownership dwelling units. Okay. And then going further down,
and this is really the last change. It is the so-called grandfathering provision. And it basically is a little bit different than what was in the select board's version, but it provides that any person or other legal entity that engaged in short-term rentals, I'm sorry, paid the room's excise tax on a short-term rental in any calendar quarter prior to July 1st of 2024. And
January 1st, yeah.
I'm sorry, what did I? Yeah, January 1st. I'm sorry. And the second part of this is they had to have owned the property prior to May 7th of 2024. They will be exempt from the 3 requirements in H, I, and J that I just discussed. Until the dwelling unit is transferred or conveyed, or the rental certificate is not renewed or revoked by the Board of Health. So, and then we say that we retain the language that is if a property is bequeathed to a person or other beneficiary through a will, trust, or other instrument, the new owner may continue to engage in short-term rental activities in accordance with this section. So that's basically the limits of what is being proposed as a first step in enacting a short-term rental general bylaw.
Thank you, John. Brooke, did you, Rob, go ahead.
Just a question on I, if I may, to John. It looked like so clearly it's prohibited for corporations, but then you specifically called out permitted by LLCs, trust, S corp, when there's a natural person. What about just a regular homeowner? Should that be called out explicitly as well? Because you've always said, we believe it's allowed anyway. Isn't it allowed anyway for LLCs, trusts, and S corps? Like, should we include homeowners specifically for their protection as well?
I'm sorry, you're in section I?
No.
I'm sorry, back on H, I'm sorry.
Oh, in H, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Well, this is the language that was in the November version of the bylaw. And so I think it's clear elsewhere that any individual may apply for a certificate of registration, or is required to file for a certificate of registration in order to operate a short-term rental in on their property. So this is purely meant to prohibit corporate ownership of STRs, but with a carve out that these other types of legal entities, LLCs, trust, or S corps, may engage in short-term rentals, but only when every shareholder, partner, or member of the legal entity is a natural person.
Is that because those other entity types fall under that definition that you had above? Of corporation, they fall, that's a blanket over trusts as well, and
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. And I apologize.
May I try, Madam Chair?
Yes, please, go ahead. Brooke.
So Rob, it is that in order to make it clear that corporations that are tied to natural persons are not included in the definition of those, that this doesn't apply to individuals at all. It's just saying corporations may not unless they are this type of corporation fully tied to natural persons. It carves out an exemption within the definition of corporation.
Yeah, and it says,
but individuals are not prohibited anywhere else in the bylaw, so they're allowed.
and the purpose and number 3, it says continue to permit the operation of short-term rentals by natural persons. So it is in the bylaw in the beginning. Peter?
Maybe I can't find it in here, but I'll go back to the question I've had since the beginning. If I've never rented before and I live here, can I rent my house?
Yes.
Yes.
Where's that?
It does.
Because that would be in zoning.
It doesn't prohibit
But
it.
if you go back
It
to,
doesn't prohibit it.
That's what the zoning piece is about.
No, that's not.
Well, that's what it-
doesn't prohibit it.
K only
No, I know.
applies to corporations.
LLCs, trusts and S corps.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was.
K only applies to corporations as defined in H, exempted by the natural person connection to a corporate entity.
But actually, it also applies to the timeshares. If the timeshares were also,
Yes, yeah, that's
if
correct.
the timeshares had been rented as a short-term rental, they can continue to be rented.
Yeah.
They just can't.
Denise, it's Stephen, can I try something here?
Sure, Stephen, go ahead. Why not?
Right, so just so there's no confusion, this is not a zoning article and it doesn't permit or prohibit anything. This currently existing bylaw is about having the Board of Health issue certificates of registration. And the only change that's proposed is saying certain entities can't get those. So right now it says it already was adopted at town meeting that anybody can get a certificate of registration. And now we're saying affordable housing, timeshares, and corporations that aren't owned by natural persons cannot get them. So this is simply a limitation on who can get a certificate of registration. It's not a zoning article and it's not a permissive article. It's about who can get those certificate of registration. So hopefully that
May
clarifies
not
for
get
Peter.
them, may
Thanks,
not
Stephen.
get them unless they meet these criteria.
Correct.
They
Correct.
pay short-term rental tax prior to January 1st, 2024,
That's right.
and they own the property on May 7th.
So, right, so the certificates of registration are already available to anybody, and this article is about limiting who can get them.
Yeah, I was trying to make the point to him that it wasn't you don't have like a written down permission to rent. That's what the whole zoning fight was about before.
Okay,
It's already there.
Town says you can.
Doesn't.
So it would, sure does.
so folks, one conversation at a time, please, because it's, yeah, come on. So, Peter, what were you saying?
No, I just think that there's a couple things in here that when I read through it, and I've certainly read through a lot of these, it's not easy for people to understand. Especially the grandfathering part and the fact that whether you can rent if you've never rented before. And I think if we're gonna sell this, it's gotta be simple. And this is fine, perfect, fine, but it's gotta be explained simply to the town meeting. And I don't think this does.
Brooke, go ahead.
So if I may, yeah, legal language is never simple. FAQs that explain it will simplify it, and we will do the same thing we attempted to do last time with a much more complex article, is identify individual scenarios and say, if this is your situation, this is how it applies to. If this is your situation, so the answer would be, if you are an individual homeowner, you've never rented, you've rented before, you can still get a certificate forever. There's no limit.
Right, but let me go to Jeremy and then you, Brian.
So
Jeremy?
don't be marketing.
Jeremy?
Let's say, I'm curious, let's say you're a homeowner and you rent your house for 2 weeks. Why do you have to get registered?
You don't.
You
You
don't.
2 weeks or less, you don't have to.
Don't even have to pay taxes, Jeremy.
Right, so this seems to say that it excludes corporations. And if you own your own house and you want to be in the short-term rental game, you must get registered with the Board of Health on a number of different issues. Those are the two things I think this thing says.
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
But I mean, chapter 1, 2, 3 says that now. You have to register now. The existing bylaw requires registration. This new version or amended version prohibits corporations. That's
Right, and just back to sort of what Peter was talking about. My recollection as to why nothing passed last time away from complexity was people who owned property thought there was a takings, that people were taking value away from them. And as I read this, I think this is pretty clear. It's just, it prohibits corporations. And the only thing I worry about is the whole registration process. People could view that as, that's a bit onerous. And I'm wondering
that passed 2 years ago.
They're used to it.
It's already the law.
Yeah, they have to register with the state already. That's the law, Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if it's already the law, why do we have it in this thing?
Because when this chapter 123 was passed initially. There are, there's an interest that the town has in ensuring that it has the appropriate tools from an enforcement standpoint and an information standpoint to make sure that all these STRs are being operated properly. There is more detail in this bylaw, which already exists, by the way, that requires owners to provide additional information to the town that is not required under the state registry program. But it's to maintain local control over the operation of STRs.
So I get back to what I think was Peter's point. Isn't there a way just to slim this down? If all this stuff's already existing law and that all this really does is prohibit corporations. Why don't we
Jeremy, I'm
just
just suggesting it be marketed differently, that's all.
Jeremy, I think what you guys are missing is that the article that's being adopted is not the entire chapter 123. The article that's being adopted is just these small amendments to the existing language, but it is presented to you in the whole, so you have the context. But what's being adopted is really just the gray parts. In other words, pages and pages of regulations exist, and we're just adding a few exceptions to that existing language for corporations, affordable housing, and timeshares.
I now understand. Thank you very much.
Brian?
I do not have a question. I'm clear now. I'm good.
Okay, excellent, Brian. Peter?
Make a motion to adopt.
No, that,
Jill had a question first.
sorry, I know we want to move on and I want you to, and thank you for all you did to pull that together. My only question is well, I have two. One is on the zoning piece, because I want to understand that.
Next.
No, I'm not voting for this until I understand what happened with that. And I'm sorry, I missed last night. I watched till 8:30. I didn't even know you got to this. So what's that? Or I'm gonna, you guys can vote. I'm not gonna vote on it until I understand that piece. But if somebody didn't love this article, but they were open to voting for Stevens, why would we? I know that's like not a great way to do it, but his is most like your article. Yeah.
I don't understand the question.
I mean, we're being asked to do motion not to adopt Stevens or take no action, I guess.
Take no action on Stevens and take no action on my proposal.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, do you want me to address that point? I think I can add some clarification.
Let Stephen so far has been perfect with this. So Stephen, go right ahead.
So I'm fine with take no action on Article 61, which is essentially the mirror version of Article 60 that you're being asked to adopt. Yep. Article 59 is the zoning article. Article 59 is only necessary if there's a judicial decision that were to be the opposite of what the town's current policy is. And so the idea is to leave that in place with the motion to approve currently adopted by the planning board. And the idea is if there's no negative court case at town meeting, to change that motion to adopt to a motion to take no action, which is my request of this commission, so that it then gets tabled because it would be unnecessary. And if people want to make changes within the zoning code later, we can do that. But at the moment, it's not necessary if there's no judicial action.
Right. But we're going to keep it until then. Great. Thank you. That's all I know.
Okay. So, Peter.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt.
Article 60? Article 60.
Second.
Article 60, yes.
And with the motion as written on the screen.
Yes.
That will be our motion. Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Is there further?
Second, it's a second, actually.
I missed the first one. They're all starting to blend in together.
Can't blame you.
Yeah, exactly right. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, Jeremy?
Aye.
Thank you. Joanna?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Rob? Peter?
Aye.
Denise? Aye.
Woo!
Yay. Okay, we need motions of take no action for 61 and 62. Is everyone comfortable doing that?
Yeah, motion to take no action on 61.
And okay, let's do them one by one. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Rob. Okay, Peter?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
thank you. Okay, it's unanimous, take no action. 62.
Motion to take no action on
Thank-
62.
Thank you, Jill.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Peter.
Aye.
Okay, Rob,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise, I, all three are unanimous. Thank you very much. We do not actually have 59 on the agenda for today, so we do have a,
You want to make a motion on it?
yes, we can, because we have discussion of warrant articles for annual town meeting 2024. So 59, it would be the motion, well, actually, it's just a recommendation. The finance committee supports the planning board motion.
So moved.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
Yes,
could I
please.
request that the commission consider the comment language that I suggested, which would explain to the public what's happening?
yes, let's put that up. Maria, can you put that up on the screen? She thought she was done. Maria was all like.
We might as well get done because they got to stay recused anyway, I think.
Yeah. So we did, so yes, thank you. I did send that to the committee today, Stephen. So they did see it, hopefully.
I guess I
So-
didn't. I obviously didn't. That's what I missed.
Okay, so this is the comments that finance committee would potentially make. We might need John Giorgio to,
Just, why would this come from us if it's a zoning?
it's, well, because, the zoning, so the planning board's motion will be the one that gets voted on, and they said motion to adopt.
Meaning it's too late for them to add this comment?
No, the finance committee can say the finance committee supports the planning board motion, and we'd like to make the following comment in respect of this article. So we get to make a comment as well at the request of the sponsor as part of the, let's say,
Clarification for the community.
thank you. We're up.
And why wouldn't that be part of like your FAQs like we're doing on the other one?
So if I may,
Go ahead, John, please.
Madam Chair, so
Go ahead.
I don't think we should lose sight of the very significant steps that Attorney Cohen and his group have taken here, which is to come to a compromise agreement on the wording of Article 60. And as Stephen has indicated, the willingness not to make a motion not to adopt the zoning bylaw, which I think we all think is going to be very contentious if we have to have that discussion at town meeting. So that's what this comment is intended to explain. And yes, Stephen did draft this, but I thought it was appropriate in terms of the overall approach that we've been taking. Only if there's an adverse judicial ruling prior to the town meeting, would there be any effort to take any, make a positive motion with respect to Article 59. So Stephen has requested, as an accommodation to his group, that the Finance Committee include this comment for Article 59. And it's up to you, of course, whether you want to do it or not, but I don't have any issue with including it as a comment from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Did that have?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the motion would be to support the planning board motion and to adopt Attorney Cohen's verbiage as our comment along with that.
So moved.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm gonna start with Rob,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise, I. Thank you. 59 got done today too. Yippee.
Thank you, members of the committee. I appreciate it.
Stephen, Chris are here.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. I'm going to skip committee reports and other business and race us right to adjournment. Race
Motion to adjourn.
adjournment.
Second that motion.
Okay, roll call. Jeremy,
Aye.
Johanna,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Denise, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Everybody
guys.
who's here, very much appreciated and,
Let me tell you something.
thanks a lot.
Wait, what, so